Number 10. Stephanie Brown. So after months of training from Batman, Stephanie Brown served as Robin during patrols. Nice, not a bad gig at all. Things were going well with the duo, you know, fighting crime, taking ass, kicking names, until she was captured by Mr. Zsasz and she resorted to using lethal force against him. That's a big no in Batman's eyes, so he fired her. Not even a write-up? Come on, dude. Even though she was saving his life, I mean, no, alright. So her next step was to steal some plans and attempt to regain Batman's trust by going after Gotham's criminal underworld. Sneaky sneaky. This didn't go as planned and a city-wide war erupted. Oof! Yikes. It wasn't long before Stephanie was captured by Black Mask. She was then tortured in order to spill the beans on Batman. So after a harrowing escape, she makes her way to Leslie Tompkins' clinic, in rough shape of course, and her injuries were too much to recover from, and Stephanie Brown died with the Caped Crusader by her side. How lovely and also how tragic. Number 9. Black Mask. Yeah, I figured this would be a suitable place for this one. Making his first appearance in 1985 back in Batman issue 386, Black Mask, also known as Roman Sionis, met his demise in Catwoman Volume 3, issue 52. See, this is why you don't threaten the people that are close to Catwoman, because after breaking out of jail yet again, Deathstroke offers Black Mask a spot in the society, to which he accepts. I'd probably accept too, that sounds like a pretty cool society. Any society is cool in that book. All the while Red Hood is dismantling Black Mask's control over the crime going on in the city. Black Mask, being Black Mask, decides to keep running his mouth and threatens the people closest to Catwoman. So what does she do? Shoots him in the jaw, killing him in the process. Wrong move, bucko! I really enjoyed how they killed him off in Birds of Prey. I was kind of hoping it'd be similar to this, but being blown up? I'm fine with that. That works like a charm as well. Number 8. Guy Gardner. Taking place in a prequel to the Injustice Gods Among Us storyline, we find Superman as the leader of Earth. Makes sense? Look at him. I mean, all those powers. Of course. Using his powers to brutally enforce peace, Green Lantern, aka Guy Gardner, wasn't really a fan of his whole concept. Good Guy Gardner. He was also onto something after all, because Guy eventually discovered that Superman had been an ally to the Sinestro Corps. Traitor. So he goes and gathers his own army, the Green Lantern Corps. Hal Jordan actually took Superman's side here, but that's only because he originally thought that Guy had killed John Stewart, which in fact Sinestro actually did. Got a little, quite the triangle we got here, boys. Hal ended up tearing off Guy Gardner's arm, Bucky Barnes style, before leaving him for death. Not a good way to go.
Number 7. She-Hulk defends Star Fox. She-Hulk has always been a huge defender of superheroes. After all, she is one herself. But everyone was still caught somewhat off guard when she signed up to defend Star Fox, aka Eros, Thanos' brother. Eros had been an Avenger and a hero, but was being charged with assaulting and manipulating others using his pheromone powers of seduction. Some Avengers stood beside him, and some preferred to keep their names out of the headlines, while others still denounced him. But She-Hulk decided to defend him in court. What was more shocking to Jennifer was when she discovered that although he had not manipulated her into sleeping with him, Star Fox had manipulated her and John Jonah Jameson, aka Man-Wolf, into marrying one another, believing it was best for both of them. Still, She-Hulk would be forced to defend him in a more cosmic court of law later on, and would of course move to divorce Man-Wolf, believing their relationship to be a complete sham. Which kinda sounds like it was? Seemed like they were about to break up when he made them fall in love with each other. Number 6. Torturing Barbara Gordon and her mom. When it comes to the shocking atrocities the Joker has committed, paralyzing and assaulting Barbara Gordon is likely very high on that list for most of us. But it's not the only time he's caused Batgirl a ton of grief, though the events of the Killing Joke are some of the most disturbingly memorable. The Joker also once kidnapped both Barbara and her mother and threatened to kill Bab's mom if she didn't marry him. Wow, that's pretty awful. The Joker really seems to have a thing for hurting any of the women belonging to the Gordon family. Number 5. Diner Massacre. When it comes to gruesome acts that supervillains have committed, one of the most shocking and traumatizing to read is the massacre that Dr. Destiny created in Neil Gaiman's Sandman. What's more shocking is it all took place because Dee was bored, and this was his way of staying entertained and having fun. It took place at a 24-hour diner, and it involved the patrons and staff there who found themselves trapped and shackled to Destiny's will, as he wielded Dream's Dreamstone. Using that ruby, he made those in the diner get intimate, fight one another, torture each other, eat one another, and eventually brought them all to a twisted and bloody end all their own. By the time Dream arrived, all of his victims were dead, and the diner was covered in body parts and drenched in blood from everything that had happened over the past 24-hour period, where Dr. D kept them trapped there and held them as his manipulated and therefore seemingly willing prisoners. Number 4. Lex for president. One of the most shocking moments for me in the comics was when Lex Luthor was actually elected to become president of the United States. What's more, he actually didn't have a terrible platform. President Luthor got elected after promising to ban fossil fuels, and after highlighting the previous administration's failings when he stepped in to help solve the problem of Gotham following their suffering of an earthquake and resulting chaos in the No Man's Land story arc. Eventually, Batman and Superman managed to expose President Luthor as the villain he truly was, acquiring a recording of him making an arms deal with Darkseid. Yeah. Not a good move there, President Lex. This also wasn't the only time we've seen Luthor be elected as President of the USA. It also happened in Mark Millar's Red Sun story and in the Justice Lord's alternate universe from the Justice League animated series. Number 3. Made their sworn enemy kill their own son. One of the most shocking revelations in comics was following a tragic scene where Wolverine was forced to kill his own son, Daken, who he believed posed too great a threat if left to live. He fought against Daken and eventually drowned him in a puddle, killing him. This scene was made even more heartbreaking through Wolverine's inner monologue, where we see Logan imagining what a normal life with his son and wife would have been like had Itsu not been killed and they hadn't all been separated. After Daken is dead and Wolverine cradles his body in his arms, Sabretooth shows up and confesses that Logan killing Daken was all part of his master plan, and that he had actually manipulated both of them into this final fight, knowing Wolverine would kill Daken and then be left haunted by the memory of doing so for the rest of his life. Number 2. Pretty much everything Kilgrave does. Whether we're talking about the comics or the Jessica Jones live action series, pretty much every villainous deed Kilgrave has ever committed has been shocking. He kidnapped and assaulted Jessica Jones back when she was Jewel, and later on sent her to kill other heroes and friends when he sent her back to the Avengers Mansion. In Jessica Jones' series, many moments come to mind as being some of the most shocking, but one that still haunts me is when the Purple Man, played by David Tennant in the show, threatens his father by forcing him to slowly lower his hand into a pulsing blender. Then, of course, there was the moment that Jessica managed to save Hope early on in the show, only to discover that Kilgrave had planned for that to happen, and that the reason Hope had fought hard to stay with Kilgrave is because he had commanded her to kill her parents when she was reunited with them, which I actually had to pause that show and take a break because I was so shocked. Number 1. Had a slice of pie. This one didn't affect the entire world or anything like that, but it did turn an innocent moment into one of the most shockingly sinister ones ever that I've read. In the Umbrella Academy series, we meet Hazel and Cha-Cha, time-traveling assassins. Our introduction to these villains in the quite unorthodox superhero story involves them eating apple pie while in their bear and dog masks respectively. They ask the server at the diner they are eating at what the secret recipe is, and overhearing their compliments, the chef comes out to share that others have traveled from far away and offered him great sums of money to get that secret, but that he joked in the past, "You'd have to chop off my arms and legs to get that secret out of me." The next scene features a bloody Hazel and Cha-Cha, who we later learn have been busy chopping off the chef's limbs. Oh yeah, they also become so distracted by a call from their boss that when the chef actually reveals that canned apples are his secret in that apple pie, they have no idea what he's talking about anymore. Mostly they just really like torturing people. And I guess a good apple pie. Who doesn't like a good apple pie?
Number 10. Joker kills Randall. Okay, in the 2019 Joker movie, written and directed by Todd Phillips, we have Arthur Fleck in his apartment before his big TV gig on the Franklin Murray Show later that night. He's then joined by his former colleagues Randall and Gary. They came in, just to check on the guy. They used to work with him, old friends. Let's do it. They question his face paint right off the bat by asking if he got a new gig or if he was planning on going to the rally. Arthur's like, no, my mom died, so I'm just celebrating. Okay, that's one way of celebrating a death. Randall then asks a few questions pertaining recent crimes. So Arthur, getting a little bit, curious, keeps the conversation going a bit, stalling as he pulls out a knife from behind him, and then out of nowhere stabs and kills Randall. Also, Gary was there, so it made us believe that nothing bad was gonna happen. Because, Arthur liked Gary. Who doesn't like Gary? And also, Gary at this point is out of the loop. So his shock of what just happened with the whole situation is kind of doing the talking for us. He's terrified of what he just saw, asking Arthur why did he just do that, and his answer was, "Do you watch the Franklin Murray Show? Yeah, I'm gonna be on it tonight." The scene is chilling because he assures Gary so well that he can go free, even at one point pretending to lunge at him as he walks by just to be funny. This scene is one of those scenes where you can't help but chuckle in fear, like your jaw's dropped and you're like, huh, what is happening right now? "You were the only one that was ever nice to me," Arthur says, before giving Gary a kiss on the forehead and sending him on his way. How lovely, I think. Number 9, the Lazarus Pit. So to save the world, you must save the life of your greatest enemy. Those are the words from Alfred as he and Batman prepare to toss Joker into the Lazarus Pit in Batman Legends of the Dark Knight issue 145. Using the purest water on Earth, Batman plans on tossing Joker into the Lazarus Pit to question him on the whereabouts of Talia and Ra's al Ghul. Knowing that the waters are capable for turning people sane for a brief amount of time, they plan to get Joker to spill the beans on the location in that moment. What a good plan, let's do it. So, while he's in the water, Alfred pulls out a gun to protect himself, but it's deemed unnecessary as Joker awakens. With his sanity? Excuse me? Yeah, it worked. And after a few confusing minutes of being awake, Joker tells the pair where they may be hiding. What do they do with the Joker? Well, they bring him along, of course.
The 3 best friends that anybody could have. We're the 3 best friends that anyone could have. We're the 3 best friends that anyone can have. And we'll never, ever, 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 ever leave each other.
Yeah, now that song is going to be stuck in your head as well. You're welcome. This moment was shocking because we find Joker reflecting on those who he's killed in the past. The dead, the dead. Sanity, such a burden, as Joker says. You can say that again. It's quite the burden. Number 8, dinner is served. In Death of the Family, issued October 2012, we find the Joker wearing a mask of his own face? Yeah, that's right, he used his face as a mask to cover his face. So he used a face mask to cover his face, which was the mask, so, The mask wasn't even good either. It was loose and flappy, and it was made of his rotten flesh. Kind of like old bologna. That was a gross image, sorry about that. Last one. So what did he even do in the first place? Well, that's the point. While Batman was restrained to a chair, Joker had threatened to ignite the place up using gasoline. What a sticky situation. Literally, because his face. Okay, that was the last one, I swear. And just then, Alfred enters. Oh, thank God, a familiar face. But he's under the control of flesh-faced Joker. Never mind. The Joker then reveals that in front of all of Batman's allies, who are also at the nightmare dinner table, is their faces. What would you do if you woke up to this? Faint? Me too.
Coming in at number 7, we've got The Walking Dead. What kind of essential reads list would this be without the horror comic that defined the last decade and beyond? Sure, the TV show and resultant spin-offs probably have a bigger audience at this point, but the comics are what got everything started. The Walking Dead is the ultimate modern zombie franchise. There are graphic novels, there are novelizations, there are video games, and they all tell compelling stories of people trying to live during a zombie apocalypse. The terror and mayhem of the initial outbreak are usually glossed over, and The Walking Dead instead opts to look at how human beings attempt to retain some semblance of real life among the chaos. The zombies themselves, while gross, disfigured, and dangerous, aren't the scariest bit by a long shot. Although Tony Moore's art style definitely sells the terror they're supposed to give off. But in the world of The Walking Dead, the zombies are pretty easy to deal with if you're able to stick to a plan. Not all people can though, and a lot of the time the deepest terror comes from how people deal with the post-apocalyptic world. Humans are capable of some truly messed up things, and this is explored in depth. In addition to being wildly popular, The Walking Dead is also long running, so if you're looking for something to really take you on a journey, maybe give it a go. Coming in at number 6, we've got Nameless. Grant Morrison writes some archaic, bleak, and hard to stomach comics, which is exactly why I'm recommending you read Nameless. It's a tale of body horror and humanity's failures. Likened by some to the works of Clive Barker and David Cronenberg, it's a nightmare on a whole other level. In it, a crew of astronauts end up crossing paths with God, like the one and only in this case. And instead of being a benevolent, loving, caring figure, God just decides it's time to crank up that despair. And with despair comes all sorts of technicolor blood and gore. Gigantic maws open up to swallow folks, endless eyes constantly watching. It's a disturbing and lasting tale, one that will confuse and cause pain. Coming in at number 5, we've got The Sandman. Neil Gaiman is a name that most folks watching are probably already familiar with. And if you're not, don't worry, he's got such a wide range of stories to consume, I'm sure you'll come across him somewhere else very soon. The Sandman is one of the most critically acclaimed comics of all time, time. It is the tale of Dream, the human form of all dreams and tales. He's imprisoned by some occultists by decades and eventually manages to escape. From here, he's able to fly around the universe, ensuring that all of the dreaming business he's been entrusted with is taken care of. There have been all sorts of genre spins throughout the series, but one that sticks out to most folks is the story known as 24 Hours. A lunatic by the name of Dr. Destiny gets a hold of a magical ruby, which he uses to control the minds of everyone in a 24-hour diner. He makes them confess their darkest secrets, and believe me, some of these are dark, and then has them torture each other to death. Teeth, skewers in the eyes, and more. Gaiman likes to work with the idea of stories eventually ending in death, as every life does, and while this disturbs some readers, others appreciate it for what it is. Up to you, I suppose. Coming in at number 4, we've got Preacher, another big name. We've got Garth Ennis and Steve Dillon at the helm, putting together a fascinating and shocking tale of life, death, and often revenge. There are so many disturbing moments throughout the series, like it literally kicks off with a church chock full of people burning to the ground. All the folks inside burn too. Talk about a hot start. From there, it only gets crazier, introducing all sorts of perverted, bloodthirsty, and generally fucked up antagonists at every turn. If you got through an issue of Preacher without meeting someone that made your skin crawl, probably reading the wrong thing. Double check that cover, will ya? Coming in at number 3, we've got Lock and Key. Following the violent murder of their father, a trio of siblings ends up at the ancient family home, the Key House. The place is full of, you guessed it, keys. But these keys are special, magical things. They open up possibilities rather than doors. Some lead to other dimensions, others cause changes in the person using them. And of course, all of this leads to the discovery of a creepy mystery. It's been recently adapted into a series by Netflix, but that has some mixed reviews. So if you want the real experience, pick up the first volume and get to page turning. Coming in at number 2, we've got Alan Moore's Swamp Thing. Swamp Thing is a legendary creature with all sorts of different adaptations. Wes Craven did a Swamp Thing. Swamp Thing was brought back recently as a series, and of course, Alan Moore, comic genius, did his version of it. To most, this is the definitive version of Swamp Thing, a hulking, decomposing mass of plant and man. Swamp Thing constantly wrestles with his own humanity, or what's left of it anyways. And while there are plenty of monsters and fights and rotten pieces of flesh, the scariest moments don't come from the bombastic. They come from the realm of the psychological. You have to read it to get it. And finally, at number 1, we've got Nail Biter. Let me break this one down for you real quick. Nail Biter is a story set in Buckaroo, Oregon. The classic small town, perfect for a serial killer to run rampant. Or serial killers, in this case. 16 of the most prolific killers known to man were born in Buckaroo, and Nail Biter takes a look at the newest. Edward Warren, also known as Nail Biter, loves to look out for people with a tendency to bite their nails. Then he kidnaps them, waits for the nails to grow back, and chews their fingers until he reaches bone. Yum. This is a story about a lunatic who just keeps getting away with crimes. No ghosts, ghouls, goblins, or eldritch monstrosities. Maybe that's what makes it so scary.
Number 10, Green Arrow. Now I'm sure we all know who Green Arrow is, so I won't dive too deep into his backstory, but I will give you a little taste just in case you're not super familiar. Now Oliver Queen, aka Green Arrow, is a vigilante superhero who fights crime in his home of Star City, using archery, martial arts, and technology. Not to mention by day he is also a wealthy playboy and billionaire industrialist turned outspoken socially progressive politician. Honestly, just think Batman, but way less sad and with arrows. Needless to say, he is a good superhero, and unfortunately he met an untimely end back in 1995. Here's how that story played out. The Russians planned on planting a bomb that releases a bacteria that would destroy millions of buildings in Metropolis, killing all of the people inside of them. The bomb works when 2 people put their hands on the detonator. While the bomb is in transit on a plane, for some reason Green Arrow put his arm on the detonator, knowing that if he removes his arm, the bomb would explode. Superman showed up and suggested that they would just cut off the appendage with his heat vision, but Oliver for some reason refused. In the end, the bomb went off and Green Arrow became, well, no more. Check it out for yourself in 1995's Green Arrow number 99 all the way to 101. Number 9, Rorschach's Death. In the last issue of the original Watchmen limited series entitled A Strong and Loving World, we get a truly shocking reveal. Ozymandias was actually the bad guy all along. Turns out he was responsible for the death of thousands in New York, the death of the comedian, the accusations on Dr. Manhattan, and the framing of Moloch. Sure, that's shocking to say the least, but there's actually a lot more, as is what happens after that's truly shocking. Now, don't get me wrong, Ozymandias' intentions were good. He did all that he could to prevent a nuclear war between the Soviet Union and the US. But it was still an injustice for Rorschach, and he wanted to expose Ozymandias. Setting out to do so, Rorschach encounters Dr. Manhattan and tells him what's actually happening. Dr. Manhattan tried to stop Rorschach from exposing Ozymandias, but Rorschach responded by saying that Manhattan had to kill him to stop him. In a shocking turn of events, Dr. Manhattan actually did so and vaporized Rorschach and chose to believe in Ozymandias' cause instead of anything else. Now, if you haven't already read this limited series, I highly recommend that you go back and check it out, starting with 1986's Watchmen, number 1. Number 8. Sue Dibney's death. Now this sad death takes place during the Identity Crisis storyline, and it's actually what sets it all in motion. Now if you're not familiar with Identity Crisis, it's basically a love story wrapped inside a murder mystery, with a concerted effort to bring a real world crime and quote unquote darkness to all of the Justice League. Now it all starts with, like I said, the death of Sue Dibney, the elongated man's wife, and from there it just spirals into a story of lines being crossed by both supervillains and heroes. Addressing heavy topics like forced mind wiping, the story made some readers pretty uncomfortable to say the least, and when all was said and done, the family members of a few heroes were dead and the reputations of others were completely tarnished in brand new ways. It's eventually realized by Dr. Midnight, Mr. Terrific, and Batman, all separately I might say, that Sue was murdered using some pretty familiar technology. However, it wasn't done by someone that we would expect. Now if you don't want to hear this, I will say cover your ears, but honestly you probably already know this by now, the murderer was Jean Loring, the wife of the Atom who was committed to Arkham Asylum after she was discovered. Now there are definitely two viewings of Identity Crisis. One is a dark tragedy reflective of the real world that we all live in now, and one is a tenaciously destructive tentacle of the Watchmen squid monster, still sort of wriggling around 15 years later. But I've only seen the former, but if you do see the latter, let me know in the comments below. Now if you haven't read it and want to give it a go, check out 2004's Identity Crisis #1 all the way to 2005's Identity Crisis #7.
Number 7. Blue Beetle. During the events of Countdown to Infinite Crisis, Ted was tracking a signal from a bug. He followed it to Checkmate headquarters in Switzerland. Upon arriving, he finds files containing all the information of all Earth's superheroes. I'm talking their strengths, weaknesses, identities even. A lot of bad stuff. And then in comes Black King and, drumroll please, Maxwell Lord. The longtime ally had been planning to use Brother Eye and the Omax to kill all of Earth's metahumans. So once the files were deleted, Ted makes a run for it. Stopped by an OMAC and locked up, Maxwell comes in to deliver the final bullet to his head, right after he tells Maxwell to rot in hell, that is. Number 6. Darkseid. Yeah, you heard me. In the final Crisis event, Batman himself killed Darkseid. Now, of course, Batman had to break his only rule to do this, but I mean, come on guys, it's Darkseid we're talking about. We can make an exception. By the time issue 6 rolls around, the world is on the brink of destruction. So Batman decides he's going to use the exact same bullet Darkseid used to kill Orion. So Batman aims and fires it right at his shoulder. Darkseid panics and tries to switch bodies into Detective Dan Turpin, but Wonder Woman comes in, uses a lasso of truth, and releases Darkseid's consciousness from Turpin's body. And at the same time, Batman died. What an event, that's right, so at the same time that Batman shot Darkseid with that bullet, Darkseid used the Omega Beams and just straight up obliterates Batman. Batman ended up teleporting to prehistoric times, but we can't not include that in this list part of this moment. Number 5. Captain Atom. Taking place in the Kingdom Come miniseries, the world is in a future with our favorite superheroes much older. Basically out of touch with the times. So the new generation of superheroes are running free doing all the dirty work. Most of these offspring are children of past superheroes. Some of the new heroes, however, end up kind of being dicks. Yeah, they're becoming a threat, being irresponsible, and they're pretty dangerous. So Batman, being Batman, wanted to ensure a safe future and prevent a war between all of the supers. Not a bad idea, but a little too late. Captain Atom then lost a fight to Parasite. The end result, Captain Atom being ripped apart, causing a nuclear explosion that decimated the entire state of Kansas. Sorry, Kansas. Oops, my bad. Number 4, Martian Manhunter. Your kind will fail. Your kind will always fail. Those are some of the last words spoken by Martian Manhunter in Final Crisis 1, after he gets trapped in a prison. He had originally went there to be undercover as John Jones, and regularly reported back to Batman. Then the villains broke free and he was left behind. Ooh, not good. Human Flame had given the villain Libra instructions to kill Martian Manhunter. Don't do it! So Libra went and stabbed Martian Manhunter with a staff in front of the entire secret society of supervillains, or SSRSAV. Okay, some acronyms don't work, okay? So upon his death, he returned back to his Martian form. And in his final moments, he still managed to send a message back to the Justice League. What a trooper! They held his funeral on his home planet Mars, with Superman giving the eulogy. Can you do mine as well, Superman? My eulogy, please? In time, not now, just like when it happens. Thanks. His final moments were expanded on in the Final Crisis Requiem storyline, teaching us more about his homeworld and the inhabitants of it. Number 3, Wally West. Heroes in Crisis 9. So after visiting the sanctuary trying to avoid another flashback scenario, past Wally West leans in to break future Wally West's neck. In order to close the timeline, one of the Wallys has to die, right? So then Blue Beetle, Batgirl, Harley, and Booster They all land and they're super confused seeing what's unfolding. Then they see Poison Ivy, who was presumed dead at the time. So future Wally knows how he feels, so he helps him up and reassures him that he's not alone. And as he himself was there just 5 days prior. Don't kill, don't run, just talk and listen. Pretty solid advice. He goes on to explain that if people could see that even the strongest of heroes are hurting inside, that they need to talk to people. Which is a pretty solid line. I feel like a lot of people reading this could use that advice in their own lives in some way. Booster suggests not killing Wally, but instead completing the loop. So by bringing back a speed clone from the 25th century, that way the old Flash can live on, and the young Flash does the loop over. Kinda like how Cap took the stones back in time to complete that loop. See, while Cap's still alive, he's kinda not because he's stuck in that loop, right? So he's gone, but he's not. But he's gone, but he's not. He's gone. The Heroes in Crisis storyline to take out Wally West went under fire. Like, I mean, what do you guys think? Were you a fan of how the deconstruction of Wally West came about? Let us know down below. Let's talk about it. Number 2, Connor Kent's death. Taking place in the Infinite Crisis storyline, Superboy is killed by Superboy Prime. What? So the other dimension Superboy Prime basically gets jealous and wants to take Superboy's spot in the Paradise dimension. He thinks he's more fitting. Yeah, okay pal, whatever you say. So Superboy Prime attacks him and kicks his ass. Backup arrives, that being the Teen Titans, Doom Patrol, and the Justice Society of America, but the next encounter ends much worse than the previous. Connor and Prime go at it, and eventually Superboy crashes them both into Alexander Luthor's multiverse tower, causing this massive explosion, stopping Alexander from destroying New Earth. Dying in the arms of Wonder Girl, Connor is told by Cassie that he saved the Earth. And in a glorious last line, he says, "I know, Cass, isn't it cool?" And then he dies just moments before the rest of the gang showed up. Superman mourning his death is actually just heartbreaking. And finally, number 1, Hal Jordan Parallax. Parallax entity is the sentient embodiment of fear, the symbol of fear, rather. So, once Hal Jordan becomes the Green Lantern after Abin Sur in Sector 2814, Sinestro made Parallax choose Hal Jordan to free itself from the central battery. Parallax spent many years influencing Hal over time, causing doubt and fear to flood his mind. Once the destruction of Coast City happened, that plus the central battery that Hal destroyed, the entity Parallax was able to latch itself onto Hal Jordan's soul. Not good. Hal's strong willpower made this plan take years to be complete, but once Cyborg Superman helped destroy Coast City, he could only hold on to that willpower for so long. Pushing through all of the anger and grief, Hal Jordan ended up sacrificing his own life to reignite the Earth's sun. That a boy, Hal. This is actually a really sad moment, like.
Number 10, Loki returns. Although Loki is a trickster that we all expect to return eventually, when he came back as a woman, many fans were shocked at his new form. Though mythologically speaking, Loki is known as an accomplished shapeshifter, and even in Marvel some of this has carried over. Still, the question remained of why this form? While Loki gave his own excuses, it was later revealed that he'd hijacked Sif's body to achieve his Lady Loki form, and would be forced later on to relinquish it. He would also die and return as Kid Loki, who had no knowledge of the villain his older self had been. And now, shockingly enough, but not if you're a fan of Norse mythos as I said, we have a version of Loki that can easily change between all of his forms at will. Pretty cool. Number 9, Wolverine defeats Hulk. Maybe not one of the most shocking moments per se, but definitely gave us a shocking panel. If you are wondering where one of the images on our thumb came from, that would be from Savage Wolverine number 5. Hulk and Wolverine have come to blows multiple times in the comics, but this is one of their most brutal fights, though not as brutal as their battle in Old Man Logan, in my opinion. During this story, Wolverine was attracted to Savage Land due to a device calling out to others to create chaos, so that an ancient monster from beneath the island could be released. Kind of a Cthulhu-looking space thing? Wolverine managed to get his wits about him, but was met there shortly after by an out-of-sorts Hulk. Wolverine figured the best way to take out Hulk was by pouncing on him and sending his adamantium claws clean through his brain. Alas, this didn't help that much, and the monster still escaped its prison, soaring off-world to meet more alien monsters out in space. Oh dear. Number 8, Hulk becomes immortal. We talked about Hulk's death by Hawkeye's arrow on part 1 of this list, but what we didn't talk about is how even after that shocking death, he just kept coming back. So many times in fact that it gave writer Al Ewing an idea. what if Hulk actually couldn't die? This concept allowed him to write a story which brought us back to the dark origins of Hulk, a man who would originally turn into a monster when the sun set. This was the original transformation story for Hulk, not based on emotions turning him into some sort of psychological horror, but based on old monster stories like that of Frankenstein, werewolves, and Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. When we got the Immortal Hulk, this was how we were introduced to the big green hero / monster, as an immortal being that when the sun sets, even when Banner had been killed, would rise again. Even though this concept was the original concept for the character, it was one we'd become so removed from that it shocked readers in a delightful way, reinventing the character they'd come to love by taking us back to his roots.
Number 7. Barry Allen's death. First of all, I just want to get it out there that the Crisis on Infinite Earths event is absolutely insane, and if you're not familiar with it, you should 1000% give it all a read. Put simply, it was an attempt to reboot the entire DC universe because everything had become a bit too confusing, and obviously DC's way of doing that was to just get rid of the multiverse and many of its characters, one of which being Barry Allen. Near the end of the event, Barry made the ultimate sacrifice by literally running himself to death in order to save countless lives. What he did is, in order to put a stop to the Anti-Monitor's plan to destroy the world with his antimatter cannon, Barry ran so fast that he created a speed vortex that would absorb the power of the cannon, but he ended up dying in the process. For years, the character remained dead, leaving the mantle to Wally West, the original Kid Flash, to serve as the Scarlet Speedster in his stead. Eventually, this story was retconned and it was revealed that Barry didn't actually die. But back in the day, this supposed death really hit home, and that's why it deserves a spot on this list today. Check it out for yourself in 1985's Crisis on Infinite Earths, number 8. Number 6. Supergirl's death. Now remember how I just said Crisis on Infinite Earths was an absolutely insane storyline and killed a ton of heroes? Well, sadly among those ranks was also Supergirl, losing her life one issue before Barry loses his. Now like I said before, the storyline was all about simplifying the DC universe and having it go back to its roots. And since there was originally only one Kryptonian on Earth, that meant Kara had to go. I'm glad to say though that the character was at least able to go out like a hero as she battled it out with the Anti-Monitor, who kept hitting her with lethal doses of his energy. She kept on fighting though until a lethal blow sadly took her out. Like the true hero she is, she sacrificed her life for her cousin Superman and died in his arms. Later we see Superman leave his Fortress of Solitude with the body of Supergirl wrapped in her indestructible cape, and he sets her free in space, promising to remember and miss her forever. Although this death was not as impactful as Barry's, I would argue that Supergirl's was much more shocking, as it was much more immediate than Barry's. Readers actually got to spend a few moments with Barry despite actually knowing that he was gonna die, while Kara's kinda just came straight out of left field. Check it out for yourself in 1985's Crisis on Infinite Earths, number 7. Number 5. Ted Kord's death. In the pages of Countdown to Infinite Crisis, the second Blue Beetle, Ted Kord, is left near bankruptcy after funds from his company were mysteriously stolen. His investigation into his missing fortune leads him to something much, much darker though. A conspiracy to wipe out the superhuman community orchestrated by the Justice League International's former manager, Maxwell Lord. Lord had definitely enjoyed his influence over the Justice League and the formation of Justice League International in the wake of Crisis on Infinite Earths. I mean, he was a wealthy and powerful businessman who claimed to have learned nobility and compassion from his late father, Maxwell Lord III. All of this pointed to him as a very genuine figure out to keep Earth safe, but I guess we were wrong because during the Invasion saga, Lord acquires the superpower of mind control, and things only got worse from there. The build up to Infinite Crisis saw many shocking events occur in the DC universe, including Lord's brutal murder of Ted Kord. Lord's betrayal didn't even end there, as he continued to damage the League throughout the Infinite Crisis. Thankfully, Wonder Woman straight up just murders him after he mind controls Superman into assaulting his fellow Leaguers, snapping his neck, which was also super shocking, so I guess this point is kind of a twofer. Check out this death in 2005's Countdown to Infinite Crisis, number 1. Number 4. Superman's death. Wonder Woman Dead Earth. This Wonder Woman storyline follows Wonder Woman being accidentally awakened by a group of survivors from a centuries-long sleep at the Batcave. Diana discovers the Earth has been reduced to a nuclear wasteland and is infected by mutated insectoid creatures. Now what does this have to do with Superman, you ask? Well, in issue 3 of this miniseries, Diana and Cheetah head to the Fortress of Solitude to see if Superman is still alive and well and can help them protect the people of Earth. Upon entering the fortress, they are greeted by robot Superman, and Diana gets quite the shock to say the least when she sees Superman dead on his throne. And it only gets worse from there because it turns turns out she was the one who killed him. Flashback all those years ago to that huge war, and we see the US release a full armada of missiles against all the Amazonians. Clark knew they were going to be targeting Smallville as well, so he went to go protect his family, which left Wonder Woman to defend Paradise Island alone. Now there were far too many missiles and her home wound up being destroyed. She completely lost it and started pummeling Superman, ending his life with a punch straight through his chest. Now the way that this was drawn is absolutely beautiful, so check it out for yourself in 2020's Wonder Woman Dead Earth number 3. Number 3, Alex DeWitt. For so many heroes, one of their biggest fears is that their secret identity will get out and put their loved ones at risk. So generally they do anything and everything that they can in order to prevent that from happening. In Kyle Rayner's case, he learned the hard way what happens if you're not careful enough. After taking over the Green Lantern mantle from Hal Jordan and receiving his power ring, Rayner seeks out his girlfriend Alexandra, or Alex DeWitt. DeWitt wasn't sure what to make of the new power Rayner had acquired, but eventually she decided to help Rayner control and understand the potential power he had command over. Probably not the best idea, because he came home one day and found out that she had been killed by the supervillain Major Force and had been stuffed into a refrigerator. Kyle, obviously upset and motivated by anger and regret, sought out Major Force. Kyle almost killed Major Force before his ring runs out of power. Major Force then takes over the fight until his green rocks that powers the power rings turns into a lantern battery and charges Rayner's ring back up. Rayner finally subdues Major Force, but when he begins to interrogate Major Force over why he was there and why he killed DeWitt, the police arrived and tried to take Rayner away. Now Rayner obviously flees and runs into Alan Scott, who tries to console him over his loss. DC writer Gail Simone, now a legend in her own right, was absolutely horrified that the company consented to kill a female character, and in such a gruesome way, merely to motivate the male protagonist. That's when she coined the term women in refrigerators for any time women in comics were killed, seriously injured, sexually violated, or depowered merely to motivate male heroes. And she published a long list of such cases, so go check it out for yourself. Now check out her death for yourself in 1994's Green Lantern Volume 3, number 55. Number 2, Jason Todd's death. The death of Jason Todd was so surprising that it not only shocked readers, it shocked DC themselves. Now the character had a pretty weird history, as he was introduced as a new teenage Robin after Dick Grayson grew up and became Nightwing, but fans weren't really too keen on him. In 1988, DC Comics writer Denny O'Neil pitched the idea to make the readers vote via 1-900 numbers on how a story should end, and O'Neil knew that the vote couldn't be on something tiny or small, so he decided that the vote would be about the fate of Jason Todd. Knowing that Todd was relatively unpopular, it seemed like the right thing to do to help settle what needed to be done with the character. Setting up a 36-hour voting period, readers got one of two numbers to call from the back of Batman number 427. The ending of that issue showed us the Joker beating Todd with a crowbar, leaving him in a warehouse that was set to explode. Then issue number 428 came out, and the final vote was 5,343 for killing Jason Todd and 5,271 against killing him, meaning that his fate was kinda sealed. Jason Todd was dead, and the iconic image of Batman carrying Todd's dead body that followed was one that is still recognizable to pretty much everyone today. Now, years after the event, O'Neil revealed that there was someone who programmed their phone to call every 90 seconds for 8 hours. That person chose the same option every time, for Jason Todd to die. Totaling around 320 votes from that one person alone, O'Neil has gone on record saying that that one person is the entire reason that Jason Todd died. So I guess they're also the reason that we have the Red Hood, so thank you? I don't know. If you're not familiar with this storyline, aka a death in the family, check it out for yourself, starting with 1988's Batman Volume 1, number 426, all the way to 429. Number 1, Death of Superman. Now, of course, we have to talk about this one, we can't not. In 1992, the writers of the Superman titles had enough of the Man of Steel and decided to just straight up kill him. Okay, not really. In response to not being able to do their original story, which was to have Lois Lane and Clark Kent get married, due to all the conflicts with the then upcoming Lois and Clark: The New Adventures of Superman, the writers were racking their brain trying to figure out what to do, and they ultimately landed on this storyline. The way they pulled this off was they introduced a new character, an almost unthinkable monster whose only purpose was to destroy things. Known as Doomsday, this monster caused some serious destruction towards Metropolis. Jump forward a little bit to 1993 and we see Superman take on this unstoppable bad guy. Obviously Superman was able to take him down because, you know, he's Superman, but both Doomsday and Superman ended up succumbing to their injuries at the end of the fight. Now, while some superheroes have been resurrected multiple times, this was the very first time that Clark Kent had bit the dust, and it sent shockwaves through the entire world of DC Comics. The aftermath of the story followed how the world reacted and who showed up to take its place, the latter part featuring the introduction of several new characters who stuck around to help later form the DCU. Death of Superman is one of the most far-reaching media events in comics history, and to this day it still stands as such. And that, coupled with the return of Superman, changed the rules for DC, opening the door for anyone to come back to life. So check out the storyline for yourself so you can see firsthand exactly what this death meant to the DC universe. Starting with 1992 Superman, The Man of Steel Volume 1, number 18.
Number 10. MJ is killed! Peter gets a hook hand. One of the most shocking series around is JJ and his son Henry Abrams' Spider-Man miniseries from 2019. Well, it started in 2019. It is only 5 issues long, but has been delayed longer than I even thought possible for a series like this. Number 4 is finally set to come out September 23rd, and 5 has been pushed from its original release of January 2020 to November of 2020. Yikes, that's a huge delay. This series starts off with a bang and is filled with tons of interesting shocks. Mary Jane dies pretty much right off the bat, killed by the villain we later come to know as Cadaverous, and causing Peter Parker to retire and abandon their son Ben, leaving him in Aunt May's care. Which is pretty crazy because Aunt May was already pretty old when Spider-Man started, so yeah. And when Peter Parker does return, he's got a moody look, a beard, and a hook hand. That is some kind of something. Peter with the hook for a hand in a world where we have super advanced prosthetics and where he's friends with genius level heroes like Tony Stark and Reed Richards and, you know, is a genius himself. And I thought I'd seen everything. Number 9. Mutant Massacre. This shocking crossover event actually was so startling and well received that it effectively worked to help boost comic sales for the series involved. It follows the story of the mysterious villainous group of mutants known as the Marauders, who we'd later learn were working for the evil Mr. Sinister, as they attempt to murder the entire mutant community known as the Morlocks, many of whom have grotesque physical mutations which cause them to be rejected by society, a group whom Futurama likely took its inspiration from when it comes to their own sewer mutants. The Marauders succeed in their mission, killing hundreds of Morlocks during this gloomy attack, which would later be referred to as the Mutant Massacre. This story also featured a particularly shocking moment when the X-Factor come face to face with the Marauders, who crucify the mutant Angel. Yikes. Number 8. Lizard eats his own son. A reformed Dr. Curt Connors would find himself becoming the Lizard once more. In the story Shed, the Lizard finally managed to kill Connors' consciousness, taking on a new mantle, Shed, and causing Connors to no longer be able to fight back against those animal instincts. Now, how did he do this? Well, by eating Kurt's son, Billy. That's right, Curt Connors as the Lizard basically ate his own son in a comic. Spider-Man at the time had been racing towards the Doctor in an attempt to stop him, but arrived too late. Fortunately, Spider-Man at least was able to reclaim some of Connors' humanity by showing him pictures of his son and forcing him to remember and face what he had done.
Number 7. The Killing Joke. Now, I feel like I've already mentioned this before, but I am gonna mention it again. This is probably my favorite Batman storyline ever. The story involved the Joker breaking loose from Arkham Asylum, kidnapping Commissioner Gordon, and attempting to drive the man mad, all to prove that it only takes one terrible day to drive anyone crazy, which is actually a theme that was revisited in the Dark Knight movie, in which the Joker believes anyone will do terrible things if the circumstances are bleak enough. Along the way, Joker attacked Barbara Gordon in a way that still has people talking decades later. Joker shot her through the spine and paralyzed her. Later, while trying to drive Commissioner Gordon crazy, Joker showed him pictures he took of Barbara that showed Joker took off her clothes and insinuated some pretty bad things. Although regarded today as a classic Batman/Joker story, The Killing Joke has also received some deserved criticism for the way that it had the Joker paralyze Barbara Gordon, making her another victim in the woman in the refrigerator trope, which I will talk about just a little bit later. Barbara did later become a hero to many paraplegics when she became the cyber crime fighter known as Oracle, but the circumstances of her paralysis are still considered some of the most exploitative moments in comic book history to today. If you think you can stomach it, check out this one shot for yourself in 1988's Batman: The Killing Joke.
Number 6. Martha Wayne. Come again? Alternate universes are fun, Flashpoint specifically. So in this universe, Flash's mom is still alive, right? But other weird paths have happened in this universe to get to that point. So things are a little different in big ways. So in this universe, Bruce Wayne is the one who got shot, not his parents. Oh nice. So Thomas Wayne ends up becoming the Caped Crusader using guns and a splash of more violence. while Martha Wayne takes on the mantle of the Joker. That's right, she immediately goes nuts after the death of her son and starts slashing up her own face, taking on the look of the Joker almost immediately. She knows Thomas Wayne, now Batman, would never kill her, so she uses that against him in the storyline. We actually caught a glimpse of this in the opening credits of Batman vs Superman, released in 2016. Didn't anybody else find it odd that Lauren Cohen and Jeffrey Dean Morgan played Bruce Wayne's parents for such a small amount of screen time? They were pretty big actors and were even bigger at the time. Well, it was revealed that a Flashpoint movie has since then been in the works, so hopefully we get to see Zack Snyder's dream of casting Jeffrey Dean Morgan as Batman, and even better, hopefully we see Lauren Cohen taking on the role of Joker. She would probably get an easy Oscar nomination for it. I'll call it now. Check that date. I'm calling it. Number 5. Lois Lane Lives. Speaking of Batman vs Superman, whenever the two cross paths, it's usually a pretty epic time. So after Lois was poisoned by the Joker in Action 17, released in 1996, 2 years after I was born, so old, Superman is faced with the toughest choice. Joker had made it so in order to cure Lois from the poison, Superman must kill the clown prince of comedy himself. Batman reminds Superman of the tremendous guilt that he felt after he killed the Phantom Zone villain in the Pocket Universe. So we got ourselves a situation. So Superman makes the hard choice but to let Lois Lane die. The Joker laughing all the while. So after her supposed death, she lets out a large gasp of air. The Joker starts laughing. So Superman and Lois now both have to deal with the fact that Superman would rather let the love of his life be killed rather than kill the Joker. See, the Joker's always strapped. He's always got a plan. It's tough times, man. Sometimes you just gotta take the L. Number 4. The Killing Joke. Batman the Killing Joke, released in 2016, also made into a feature-length animated film, is one of my favorite storylines. Let me explain why. So, after the Joker had escaped Arkham Asylum, his first stop was to hit up Commissioner Gordon's house, obviously. Barbara unfortunately had to answer the door. God. So Joker fires a bullet that ended up paralyzing her below the waist. And after taking some pretty messed up photos of Barbara, Joker kidnaps Commissioner Gordon and forces him to go on a ride in this messed up amusement park that he's brought him to. And the ride isn't that much fun because as the ride goes on, Gordon is forced to see these horrible photos of his daughter taken from that night. What an absolute nightmare. I've been on roller coasters, but none have been that scary, I don't think. Number 3. Joker kills the audience. Batman The Dark Knight Returns Part 2. So this moment mirrors what happened in the finale of the Joker movie, kinda. So Joker is invited on a talk show to get some insight behind his madness. Always a great idea. Let's get more of those guests on there. After being asked by the host why he's killed people, Joker explains how he's going to kill everybody in this room. And cue the panic laughs. Joker begins to explain that he thinks he's Batman's psychotic obsession. But then after asking about the lovely mugs that guests would get on these talk shows, the Joker goes, "Oh nice," breaks the mug and then stabs Dr. Bartholomew in the neck, who was aiding Joker for this interview. So it turns out the Joker was not that cured at all. And if that wasn't bad enough, he then murdered the entire audience with poisonous gas. Just a nice finishing touch. A+. Number 2. Killing Rachel. My favorite portrayal of the Joker is still Heath Ledger's. Now, I love the other versions, but after seeing this movie when I was younger and seeing Heath's performance for the first time, it was just surreal. One of the most shocking moments from that movie was when he made Batman choose between saving Harvey Dent or Rachel. And I, of course, had to include this in our list. This is a great moment. The build up to the scene and the character choices that Heath made to express the insanity of the Joker, so good. The scene, of course, doesn't end on a happy note. As we all remember, Rachel gets blown away to smithereens and Harvey starts to mentally decline after her loss, thus becoming the notorious Two-Face. And finally, number 1, the Joker breaks his own spine. Excuse me? Ever lean back in your chair at work and you kind of give it a bit too much? Ooh, gives you quite a oh my god feeling. It's not pleasant. Well, in the 1986 The Dark Knight Returns, we find Joker and Batman hashing it out. So while Batman is kicking his ass, he explains to him how many people he's let die simply by just not killing the Joker. "I never kept count of them," says the Joker, and Batman responds simply with, "I did." So Joker begins to stab Batman, and Batman twists Joker's neck. He's still alive enough to taunt Batman, still somehow. "Come on, finish me," he begs. Batman doesn't budge. So Joker decides, you know what, he's done enough. So the Joker decides to twist his own neck so hard, making it so that he himself has the final blow, thus now making Batman
Number 10. Dr. Phosphorus's fate. We still aren't sure if Dr. Phosphorus will pull through, but we are sure of how passionate Astrid Arkham is about ensuring his survival. She is the Arkham Knight and the leader of the Arkham Knights, appropriately, in Gotham, made up of the criminals and the criminally insane former patients of Arkham Asylum. I actually really enjoy the idea of this surprising, heroic, and loyal team who would follow Astrid to their deaths. In fact, in Future State, the next Batman issue number 3, it looks like Dr. Phosphorus may have just done that, dying, having suffered for so long and simply wanting to give in and just rest. But Astrid won't let him, and as heartless as that sounds, it actually comes across as fervently caring. Phosphorus gets shot down in their latest battle, and now it's up to the medical team at their home base to save his life. It's kind of hard because I'm like, for Phosphorus, I feel like him passing away wouldn't be bad, but I feel like for Astrid, I want him to pull through. I don't know. Number 9, Superman punches the sun. I don't know if this one was like super shocking in terms of reveals or anything like that, but it was shocking in a character development giggle-inducing sense, which I think is a form of shock. Happy shock? In Future State Superman / Wonder Woman issue number 2, we get a little trading spots moment between Wonder Woman and Superman. While Superman battles the sun god, not really believing in gods himself, he ends up deciding to just go with it a little more, rather than trying to explain away what's going on or dismiss it. In fact, he actually embraces it so much, he faces it head on, punching the sun god, and thereby defeating him. Much to Wonder Woman's surprise, and much to my enjoyment, and hopefully your enjoyment too. Number 8, Slam Bradley's nightclub. Not only was it surprising to see Slam Bradley running a nightclub, but it was also equally surprising a few pages later when a shootout happened there. Oh no! Although, I mean, we are in Gotham, and this is Gotham City Sirens that we're talking about, so maybe I shouldn't be too surprised. However, I was shocked and crestfallen to see Bradley get shot and likely killed again, and to see Catwoman herself get shot and wounded again. Also, how many times has Selina taken a bullet now in the comics? Jeez, I feel like it's happened enough that it could have its own list. Poor Catwoman. Someone count the bullets in the comments. Number 7, Mystique betrays the X-Men. This time around, Mystique betrayed the X-Men in a very roundabout way, and it's unclear whether this was an intentional betrayal or simply something that happened because Mystique was possibly in love with one of her rivals. In 2013's Uncanny X-Men issue 24, it was revealed that Mystique had actually married none other than Charles Xavier. We found out following Charles' death in Avengers vs. X-Men, when She-Hulk came, presumably as his lawyer, to read out his last will and testament, and handle the affairs of his estate. Of course, the X-Men were shocked to hear Xavier and Raven Darkholme, aka Mystique, had married in secret. We also knew at this point that Raven had bore Xavier a child, but even more shocking, Xavier left his school to her. In effect, she kind of got Xavier to betray his own X-Men, leaving the school to her instead of them. Later on, this marriage and this draft of the will would be seemingly erased from existence when Matthew Malloy, revealed to be secretly the most powerful mutant alive, had to be wiped from the timeline.
Number 6. Mystique betrays Mr. Sinister. So while Mystique was with the Marauders during the hunt for Hope Summers, Hope was the first New Mutant born since M-Day, so it was kind of a big deal. Mystique was working with Gambit, who at the time had plenty of reasons to go after Mr. Sinister. Mystique ended up pushing Mr. Sinister against Rogue, and with Rogue's killing touch, did just the trick with skin-to-skin contact. Rogue at this point was even tired of Mystique's manipulation. She even tried to kill Mystique herself with her touch, but Rogue ended up discovering that this baby actually had given Rogue her full powers back, eliminating the Strain 88 virus. In doing so, she absorbed the memories of, you guessed it, Mystique. And once that happened, she told Gambit that she just needed to be left alone, she needs a minute, and she walked away.
Mystique betrays Wolverine. Again. There have been a few times this has happened as well, as you've already seen in this list. However, I'd like to focus on the one where Mystique helped send Wolverine to hell, working with the Red Right Hand, an organization who literally was bound together by the hate they all shared for Wolverine. That's some bonding right there. Mystique took the form of Melita Garner, one of Wolverine's lovers. Under this guise, she was able to lure him into the center of a ritualistic circle, created for the sole purpose of separating the target's soul from their body. Logan's soul was ripped asunder and sent to hell while his body stayed on Earth and became possessed by a demon and wreaked all kinds of havoc. Mystique would later on attempt to make things right with Wolverine, warning him of the red right hand after helping to bring him back from hell, but he wasn't having any of it and refused to trust, forgive, or even listen to Mystique.
Number 4. Mystique betrays Deadpool. So in Deadpool issue 27, Mystique and the Merc with the mouth were actually married, believe it or not. We start off with Deadpool asking her to sign divorce papers. And I know what you're thinking, wait, the two of them didn't work out? Get out of town. Not really. In fact, Mystique was really just cuddling up to Wade Wilson, simply just to get closer to the Weapon X program. Not a bad move. She was just using him as a way in, so that she could eventually steal the files. Not cool. I mean, Deadpool actually got married a handful of times, as we all know, so don't worry, I don't think this broke his heart too much.
Number 3. Mystique betrays Rogue and Gambit. While Mystique and Gambit have worked together during their time with Mr. Sinister and both love and care about Rogue, Mystique hasn't always approved of her daughter's choice to be with him. In fact, at one point she even tried to break up this epic longtime couple. Disguising herself as the mutant student, Fox, she attempted to prove that Gambit was not right for her daughter by trying to seduce him in the showers. Gambit refused her advances, insisting he loved Rogue. The two had been experiencing some strain due to the lack of physical intimacy in their relationship and were going through sort of psychic couples counseling sessions with Emma Frost. And you could tell that Gambit, while steadfast in his love for Rogue, was definitely physically tempted. Turns the shower to cold.
Number 2. Mystique betrays the X-Force. So after Mystique had joined the new Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, they had this plan. The plan was to expose and destroy X-Force, and while they were at it, claim Genesis as their own version of Apocalypse. So she disguised herself as Psylocke so she could properly seduce Phantom X. Cool. But she was exposed and it ended up causing this big fight. Not cool. Mystique ended up telling Phantom X about the toxin she used to poison him, and she said that somebody was after Psylocke, similarly how she's after him. So he left, he got out of there. So after her and the rest of the Brotherhood watched Ultimaton explode and kill the X-Force, she actually had her own secret plan to use Evan to kill the Shadow King, thus claiming the leadership of the Brotherhood. But what she didn't know was that X-Force was still bumping and tricked her into leaving the base. Nice, a lot of trickery going on in this one. Check out Uncanny X-Force issue 31 and see for yourself. You don't want to miss it.
Number 1. Mystique betrays Nightcrawler. We know that Mystique was Nightcrawler's mother and that while married, she had an affair with his demonic father, Azazel, in order to conceive him. When he was born, however, the strain of giving birth caused her to lose control of her shape-shifting skills, revealing to the humans that attended her true colors, so to speak. Learning that their lady was a mutant, an angry mob chased after her and her baby, who was also born looking like a blue little demon. During her escape, she chucked her newly born baby over a waterfall so it would be easier for her to disguise herself and get away. Fortunately, the baby that would become Kurt Wagner teleported himself to safety. Yeah, the betrayal in this mother-son relationship started real early. Number 10. Pitt. This one is a little more loosely connected in terms of story, but the look and connection of Pitt's creator to Hulk is what causes comic fans to draw parallels. Pitt was originally created by Dale Keown for Image Comics. He first appeared in his own self-titled series Pitt in the 90s, and wow, he definitely has a 90s look. Check out that sweet studded leather vest with plaid-inspired lining and all of those chains. You can never wear too many chains in the 90s. Dale Keown, Pitt's creator, was well known for his work as a penciler on the Incredible Hulk series during Peter David's run, and it's usually this connection and Pitt's ginormous, muscle-bound appearance that make people think of the Hulk when they see him. Pitt himself was a human-alien hybrid creature from outer space who was created in a lab aboard a spaceship. It's like a cosmic Hulk. Number 9. Rampage. Not just taking inspiration from the Hulk, but likely taking inspiration from his cousin, Jennifer Walters, aka She-Hulk, as well. Rampage was originally known simply as Kitty Faulkner. Dr. Kitty Faulkner, that is. Kitty was a brilliant scientist working for Star Labs. An accident wherein Kitty was exposed to massive solar radiation during a demonstration gone wrong caused her to be transformed, however, into the orange giantess known as Rampage, who also sported a red mohawk. A fight with Superman where he absorbed excess radiation from her giantess Rampage form caused her to return once more to her human appearance as Dr. Faulkner. There would be other times, however, that Kitty would return to her Rampage form. Like She-Hulk, she also appears to keep her wits while in her Hulkish appearance. Number 8. OMAC. OMAC stands for One Machine Attack Construct, and was created by Brother Eye to be used in their war against those who would oppress them. Originally in New 52, OMAC was the human known as Kevin Coe. Kevin Coe was an employee of Project Cadmus who would be taken over and in essence assimilated into the being referred to as OMAC, a servant and warrior of Brother Eye. Brother Eye can activate OMAC whenever they like, transforming Kevin into the biotech being possessing super strength and durability known as OMAC. While in this form, originally Brother Eye would be in complete control of OMAC. However, when Brother Eye was killed, they gave Kevin both his personality and control back as one of their last actions. The consequence of this was that Kevin would no longer be able to revert to his human form, becoming only OMAC. Number 7. Yara Flor leaves the Justice League. This was a shocking one for me. Although we didn't see it specifically happen in real time, it was alluded to in the Superman/Wonder Woman comic that at the time that comic takes place, Yara is no longer part of the League. I love her reasoning behind operating the way that she does too and not being a part of the League. She has a really powerful speech where she kind of just talks about how she doesn't want to be a part of the system because it never changes, which is apparently how she always is able to anticipate that the Amazon rainforest will catch fire, because it kind of always does. There are always people ready to take advantage and find new ways to game the system. So she doesn't want to be any part of the system. She's like, people wouldn't worry about having to deal with me if I was part of the League, because I'd be part of them in a way. But I love it. Number 6, Bat in Peril. I thought the cliffhanger ending in the next Batman issue number 2 was a doozy personally, and then issue number 3 came along. Oh my goodness. I mean, I know this is Batman, and although he's a new Batman, he can likely get out of almost any predicament, because that's just what Batman is known for being good at, no matter who is underneath that cowl. I'm sure Jace can handle himself, but also, can he? I'm concerned. At the end of issue 2, we saw Jace as Batman confronted by a bunch of peacekeepers, forced to surrender. In issue number 3, we see how he gets out of that, only for him to end up being attacked and then strangled by the civilians that he's actually trying to help, who are sort of vigilantes in their own right, who decided to actually take justice into their own hands when they believed the system had failed them. Now, Batman is probably going to be able to get out of this one too, but I honestly cannot wait to read how that happens. This story started off slow, but the last few issues have really just started to pick up for me, and I've really been enjoying them. Starting to really like Jace, and I feel like we still don't know a lot about him, but I'm just liking the mystery too of trying to figure out more about him with his little hints. Number 5, Teen Titans Academy. In the Teen Titans comic, we appear to be at a very devastating point in superhero history, filled with flashbacks. This series takes us back to a happier time when the Teen Titans members acted as teachers at their very own academy that they had opened. In their present day, however, we see them taking on a great threat which emerged, destroying the academy years ago and killing many of their pupils, teachers, and friends in the process. At least I think it was years ago. I don't really know how long ago it was, so I'm kind of just guessing there. This is a pretty shocking and bleak future that just makes us wonder more about how exactly we're brought here using the magical superhero amulet known as the H-Dial. How did this great threat, how exactly did it get unleashed? Because we see a bit of it, but still a little mysterious. Number 4, Bruce Wayne on a train. I just like that it rhymes. This was a reveal that happened near the end of Catwoman issue number 1. Yes, spoilers. Reminder of that warning I mentioned before we started counting here, because this one was a nice little surprise that I found in Catwoman issue number 1, where we follow Selina on a very interesting train heist, on a train full of the magistrate's passengers / prisoners. They're prisoners. That's what they are. Catwoman ends up freeing and teaming up with Automatopoeia, while an in-disguise Talia al Ghul ends up finding what appears to be Bruce Wayne. But is it really Bruce Wayne, or could it be an imposter or a clone? So many thoughts flew through my mind at this ending. Either way, a very delightfully surprising cliffhanger ending to that issue. But we'll have to wait for Catwoman 2 to find out more. Number 3, Black Lightning. shocking in the literal sense of the word as well. Jefferson Pierce received a major upgrade in Future State, although it seems a bit unstable to start. It seems that somehow his body was transformed into what looks like pure black lightning, making him a more deadly and unstoppable force, one that can also utilize his energy to move through others or travel into objects. How did this happen? In the next Batman issue number 3, in the continuation of the Outsider story, we gotta learn a little bit more about that, though it still remains pretty mysterious. What we're told is that this transformation came from magic and was caused by Black Lightning fighting the wrong magician at the wrong time, but for the right reason. So that's all we know for now. But I honestly cannot wait to learn more. Super cool to see him this powerful. He reminds me of Dr. Manhattan a bit, like the whole look. I like it. Number 2, where's Barbara? I just love the full page reveal for this one. In the Batgirl story that was included in Future State, the next Batman issue number 2, we learn about a plot to try and save Batman, who Cassandra Cain was led to believe is actually locked up somewhere in the Magistrate's detention facility, potentially being held somewhere deep, deep underground, and being held prisoner there. Dun dun dun. However, at the end of the comic, it's revealed that while Cassandra was right about where the signal she was tracing was coming from and kind of leading her to, it turns out that it wasn't Batman who was kept there, but instead was none other than Barbara Gordon, aka Oracle, aka Batgirl herself. I like how I said that like it was a huge reveal, but from the name of this point and then my little bit of story, you're probably like, I know where this is going. Reveal. Number 1, the Four Horsemen. Probably one of the most shocking reveals has been that Future State seems to be actually building to something grander than all of its just neat, weird, and pretty little parts. In Teen Titans, we saw a glimpse of this coming together when it was revealed who were the main adversaries in Teen Titans issue number 2. Here we see the Four Horsemen actually all appearing to be somewhat recognizable characters. While some are more recognizable than others, I'm sure, depending on what you're reading, the fact that they have been featured or hinted at throughout this event, or line, whichever you prefer to call Future State, popping up in various different stories was pretty surprising and neat. In fact, it's said that the more Future State comics you read, the more hints you'll actually have towards the major overarching plot and what it's about, and how all these stories kind of connect with one another. Number 10, Great World Leader. Dr. Doom is known for being one of the most loved of all the most vile villains around. Despite the fact that he's evil and egotistical, fans still seem to enjoy rooting for him, even if they know he's up to no good. And he usually is. Up to no good, I mean. Usually Doom finds his often elaborate plots foiled by the Fantastic Four, or the various other heroes he comes up against. But one time, he actually succeeded in ruling the world using the powers of the Purple Man, whom he trapped in a psycho prism. But that wasn't even the most shocking part of this deed. The most shocking part was that he was actually a really good ruler, and the world flourished while under his complete control. In fact, everything was going so well that Doom became bored of it and gave up his dream of ruling the world, leaving just as the heroes had managed to break free of his mind control over them and showed up to stop him, only to find there was no one to stop because Doom didn't like the fact that there was no challenge, no one vehemently opposing him. Number 9, Created Life. This was shocking because it kind of went against everything we've known this villain to be. Galactus is more of an unstoppable constant cosmic force than a traditional ill-intentioned supervillain. We always expect him therefore to continue doing what he does best, devouring worlds, as we've known him to do pretty much forever. However, this all changed when the heroes attempted to destroy him once and for all in 2015 in the comics. They put him back in the incubator he'd emerged from during the Big Bang, but something unexpected happened. Instead of being destroyed, he was reborn as Galactus the Lifebringer, and went on a mission to create life instead of destroying it. Number 8, Apocalypse joining Krakoa. I mean, all of the mutant villains joining Krakoa were pretty memorable, but especially Apocalypse. When he decided to stand with the heroes he had opposed for years, in essence becoming one of them for the greater good of mutant kind, it was a moment in the comics where I audibly gasped. Seeing him and so many other villainous mutants like Mr. Sinister emerge from that Krakoan gate, ready to pledge to follow the nation's rules and stand beside mutants who for years they had previously tormented and opposed, was just awe-inspiring. I love it, and yet I don't think any of us originally saw that coming. Villains choosing to stand beside heroes in order to forge a new mutant nation. Of course, given Apocalypse's backstory and the relationship between Krakoa and Arakko, I suppose we should be much less shocked now. Number 7. Adamantium go bye-bye. Bye-bye, Adamantium. There you go. Gone. One of the most brutal things to happen to Wolverine in the comics as a result of the mutant villain Magneto, who now honestly is more hero than villain in the comics. However, at the time, Magneto ended up pushing the X-Men to a breaking point when he used his powers as the Master of Magnetism to pull all the adamantium out of Wolverine's body. Miraculously, Wolverine managed to survive the de-adamantizing process, but it cost him his nose and his wits as he became more and more animalistic. De-adamantizing, yeah, that's a word now, friends. I just made it a thing. Eventually, Wolverine would get his adamantium back, but the moment where it was taken was quite brutal. Number 6. Breaks a back. One of the most shocking moments in comic book history comes from the Batman story Nightfall. In issue 497, in a story aptly titled The Broken Bat, Bane finally managed to defeat the undefeatable Caped Crusader. Batman was run down from working overtime when it came to being faced with all of Gotham's villains in one night. Bane took advantage of this and managed to break Batman's back over his knee, meaning that for a time, Batman had to retire while he healed. And at the time, many actually wondered if Batman would ever fully heal and return again. I mean, he just had his back broken. Most people don't, have their backs broken and then are just like, oh yeah, I'm fine, it's great. So this was a very startling plot point in and of itself to happen, and an astonishing victory for Bane, making him one of the most revered Batman villains to this day. Number 5. Helped heal Batman's trauma. During the Three Jokers comic, we learn of a dastardly plot wherein the three Jokers that we know to exist are seeking to create a new Joker to take over for them in tormenting Batman. Or to join them in tormenting Batman? It's a little unclear. Someone more inspired, basically, is what they're looking for. We later learn, however, that this is not the true plot at hand. Instead, it is revealed that this was all a part of one of the three Jokers' master plan to eliminate the other Jokers. So only he will remain, while at the same time helping to heal Batman of his traumatic past by giving him the opportunity to confront, save, and eventually forgive Joe Chill, the man responsible for killing his parents all those years ago. This plot obviously caught many of us off guard and left us flabbergasted by the end of the 3-issue series. As it is revealed, the Joker did all this to help Batman heal so that he could claim the title of causing Batman the most trauma. It's just so twisted. It's perfect, but it's also so twisted. It's something most readers didn't see coming. That's why it's so perfect. Number 4. Monty. In Brian Azzarello's graphic novel Joker, we see just how twisted the Joker appears to his own people, the criminal crew that often work for him. We see him through the average criminal Joe eyes of Johnny Frost. Johnny becomes the Joker's driver and later confidant of sorts. When the Joker gets out of Arkham Asylum, Johnny is the one to pick him up and ends up taking him back to a club, eventually the Grin and Barrett, where Harley Quinn is stripping. Joker is not impressed by this and blames Monty, the club owner, who is also kind of supposed to be his friend, but is definitely terrified of him. As such, he and Harley take Monty to the back and skin him alive before ordering him to go out skinless and dance, paying him for his efforts. The other thing that's really terrible about that story is that Joker borrowed that dollar from Monty that he slapped on his skinless bottom after, so that's also really messed up. Obviously, Monty doesn't make it far during that skinless dance before he dies, but the whole scene in graphic novel really is just quite shocking. The whole thing is shocking. Number 3. Teamed up with Porky Pig. There are a whole series of bizarre but kinda great Looney Tunes and supervillain team-ups at DC because Warner Brothers. But the one I'm focusing on here is the team-up between Lex Luthor and Porky Pig. Porky Pig was really down in his dumps at the beginning of this issue, like deep down in his dumps. The beginning of the issue starts with Porky considering taking his own life, so it's really dark. But everything gets turned around when, while working at Lex's corporation, he is acknowledged by the big boss himself. Porky is lifted up by Lex and as a result teams up with him to help him promote his newest online service, Lexima. Unfortunately, this is also part of Lex's plan to use the naive Porky as a scapegoat later down the line, which Porky only learns after it's too late. Hearing of a Lex team up with Porky Pig is one of the most shocking things I've heard of when it comes to villain stories, but oddly enough, all these stories are also pretty well executed, so it's shocking, but it's also great. Number 2. Eats a Baby. What kind of messed up universe did this happen in, you might wonder? Why, none other than Dynamite's the boys, of course. Although you might not expect that world to be as shocking anymore simply because you're just always expecting to be shocked. There are still those moments that, well, they manage to surprise you. Like when we see Homelander eat a baby. Although that wasn't actually Homelander, it was Black Noir posing as Homelander. Black Noir in the comic series is a clone of Homelander who was created to be a failsafe to replace Homelander if he went off the rails. But when Black Noir never gets the order to take out Homelander and replace him, it drives him insane. And so he decides to dress up as Homelander and commit all kinds of unspeakable acts in the hopes that it'll be enough for Vought to give him the kill order that he so desires so he can finally take Homelander's place. Though if you've watched the Amazon Prime show, we still don't know who Black Noir is, so this could be a thing that comes in, could be not. I think the series is gonna go somewhere else personally. Either way, a baby was eaten in the comic series, and that is just still shocking to me, even though it's the boys and I should expect it. Number 1. Making a supervillain. Injustice was filled with shocking moments, although one of the biggest was the moment that kicked off the whole splitting of this very different reality from the history of the main continuity. In Injustice, the Joker came up with a perfect plan to corrupt one of his foes, and in so doing pretty much mess with his biggest enemy, Batman. This time around, Joker wasn't trying to harm the loved ones of Bruce Wayne, but Kal-El, Clark Kent, Superman. The Joker kidnapped Lois Lane, who we had just learned was pregnant with Superman's child. When Superman rushed to save her, he was faced with Doomsday, who he fought furiously, eventually taking Doomsday up to space in order to defeat him. Alas, it wasn't actually Doomsday that Superman had been fighting. He noticed 2 heartbeats fading and realized Joker had actually tricked him into somehow hallucinating that Lois herself had appeared as Doomsday. Oh no! So Superman killed Lois Lane and his unborn child. It was this shocking act that would lead Superman to murder the Joker and become the supervillain version of himself in this alternate reality story. Number 10. Reveals their true colors. As we work towards building up to the X-Men event 10 of Swords, we learned a little bit more about Apocalypse's history, and the old mutant world as well as his royal family whom he had left behind in Morocco a long time ago. Summoner arrived in Dawn of X and revealed himself to be Apocalypse's grandson, the son of his daughter, War. Summoner claimed that they needed to create a gate that would take them back to Morocco, and we learned that Apocalypse's presence in the Excalibur series had kind of been all about that for him. But the most shocking moment didn't come from Apocalypse himself, but from Summoner, who revealed that they were not indeed on the side of the mutants, and that their true plot was to lay a trap for their mutant grandfather and those fellow citizens of the mutant nation of Krakoa. Apocalypse ended up almost dying, while the mutant rockslide Santo Vaccaro actually did lose his life and was even unable to be properly resurrected due to the nature of his death. Number 9. Kills Robin. Anytime a Robin dies, it's pretty traumatic, whether we're talking about Stephanie Brown being killed by Black Mask or Jason Todd being beaten to death and then blown up by the Joker. However, the first time these things happen tend to be the most shocking and most iconic, making Jason Todd's death just that more startling when it happened in Death in the Family. Despite the fact that there was a poll in place for people to vote on whether or not Jason lived, most wrote off the poll as not really mattering and being more of a gimmick than something that would actually affect the story. So everyone was exceedingly shocked when Jason Todd was killed off as a result of people voting for that to be the story's ending, even though, you know, we all knew that was probably gonna be the story's ending, because you probably voted for that, but whatever, I guess. Still shocking. And before we get to this next point, I just wanted to say thank you so much for being here and watching this video. If you could, it would help us out a ton if you click that subscribe and click the like on this video. It really does help us out and we do appreciate it. Number 8. Dr. Manhattan's power. Batman Who Laughs is still a relatively new villain in comic history, but he quickly rose in popularity since his introduction. And he continues to not only rise in terms of his ever-expanding fan base, but also in terms of his power level. He was originally allied with Barbatos and then Perpetua. Currently, the Batman Who Laughs proved his mettle in a battle against Apex, Lex, and has the powers of Dr. Manhattan, which he stole. Yeah, he stole those powers. It's nuts. And while he is a villain who, you know, we expect to do all sorts of crazy things like stealing Dr. Manhattan's powers, the Batman Who Laughs still manages to surprise those of us who are already expecting a surprise from him in the comics with his diabolical and most devious plots. You can just never follow him. You're like, he's probably gonna, oh, and then he did something else. Okay then. Number 7. through a baby. This was mostly shocking in terms of how twisted it was. For this feat, Joker managed to defeat Gordon's new wife, Sarah, using a baby. Well, a baby and a gun. Joker had kidnapped the babies of Gotham, and Sarah Essen Gordon, who was also a capable cop, had managed to track him and the babies down. She had her gun locked on the Joker but was unable to take him out because he was holding one of the infants. He then disarmed her by throwing the baby at her, which caused her to drop her gun so she could catch that baby, leaving her unarmed and making it easy for Joker to shoot and kill her. Basically, all to get back at Commissioner Gordon, who actually had to hold himself back afterward. The death of Sarah pushed Jim to the point that he was ready to kill the Joker. Pushing Jim's buttons is the sole reason, it seems, why the Joker often tortures the women who are close to him.
Number 6. Identity Crisis. Now at its core, Identity Crisis is a love story wrapped inside a murder mystery with a concerted effort to bring real-world crime and quote-unquote darkness to the Justice League's ivory watchtower. It all starts with the death of Sue Dibney, the elongated man's wife, and from there it spirals into a story of lines being crossed by which supervillains and heroes. Addressing heavy topics like forced mind-wiping, the story made some readers pretty uncomfortable, and when all was said and done, the family members of a few heroes were dead and the reputations of others were tarnished in brand new ways. It's eventually realized by Dr. Midnight, Mr. Terrific, and Batman, all separately I might add, that Sue was murdered using some pretty familiar tech. However, it's not done by someone that you would expect. Cover your ears now if you don't want to hear who it was. Okay, the murderer was Jean Loring, the wife of the Atom who was committed to Arkham Asylum after she's discovered. There are two viewings of Identity Crisis. One is a dark tragedy reflective of the real world, and one is a tenaciously destructive tentacle of the Watchmen squid monsters still wriggling around 15 years later. I've only seen the former, but if you've seen the latter, I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Haven't read it and want to give it a go? Well, check out 2004's Identity Crisis number 1 all the way to 2005's Identity Crisis number 7. Number 5. Jason Todd's death. The death of Jason Todd was so surprising that it not only shocked readers, it shocked DC themselves. Now the character has had a pretty weird history, as he was introduced as the new teenage Robin after Dick Grayson grew up and became Nightwing. But fan reaction to Jason was pretty mixed. In 1988, DC Comics writer Denny O'Neil pitched the idea of making the readers vote via a 1-900 number on how a story would end, and O'Neil knew the vote couldn't be on something small, so he decided the vote would be about the fate of the second Robin, Jason Todd. Knowing that Todd was relatively unpopular, it would help settle what needed to be done with the character. So, setting up a 36-hour voting period, readers got one of two numbers to call from the back of Batman number 427. The ending of that issue showed us the Joker beating Todd with a crowbar, leaving him in a warehouse that was set to explode. Then issue 428 came out and the final vote was 5,343 for killing Todd and 5,721 against it, meaning his fate was sealed. Jason Todd was dead, and the iconic image of Batman carrying Todd's body that followed was one that is still recognizable to most comic fans today. Years after the event, O'Neil revealed there was actually someone who programmed their phone to call every 90 seconds for 8 hours. That person chose the same option every time for Jason Todd to die. Totaling around 320 votes from that one person alone, O'Neil has gone on record saying that one person was the reason why Jason died in the first place. If you're not familiar with this storyline, aka Death in the Family, check it out for yourself, starting with 1988's Batman Volume 1 number 426 to number 429. Number 4. Alexandra DeWitt's death. For so many heroes, one of their biggest fears is that their secret identity will get out and put their loved ones at risk, so generally they do all they can in order to prevent that from happening. In Kyle Rayner's case, he learned the hard way what happens if you're not careful enough. After taking over the Green Lantern mantle from Hal Jordan and receiving his power ring, Rayner seeks out his girlfriend Alexandra, or Alex DeWitt. DeWitt wasn't sure what to make of the new power Rayner had acquired, but eventually helped Rayner control and understand the potential he had command over. In hindsight, probably not the best idea, because one day he came home and found out that she had been killed by the supervillain Major Force and had been stuffed into a refrigerator. Kyle, obviously upset and motivated by anger and regret, sought out Major Force. Kyle almost killed Major Force before his ring runs out of power, and then Major Force takes over the fight until his quote-unquote green rock that powers the power rings turns into a lantern battery and charges Rayner's ring. Rayner finally subdues Major Force, but when he begins to interrogate Major Force over why he was there and why he killed DeWitt, the police arrive and try to take Rayner away. Rayner obviously flees and runs into Alan Scott, who tries to console him over his loss. DC writer Gail Simone, now a legend in her own right, was horrified that the company had consented to kill a female character in such a gruesome way, merely to motivate the male protagonist. She coined the term women in refrigerators for any time women in comics were killed, seriously injured, violated or depowered merely to motivate male heroes, and she published a long list of such cases. Check out her death for yourself in 1994's Green Lantern Volume 3, number 55. Number 3. Death of Superman. In 1992, in response to not being able to do their original story, which was to have Lois Lane and Clark get married, due to conflicts with the then upcoming Lois and Clark The New Adventures of Superman, the writers of the Superman titles just decided to straight up kill him instead. The way they pulled this off was to introduce a new character, an almost unthinkable monster whose only purpose was to destroy things. Dubbed Doomsday, he cut a swath of destruction towards Metropolis. Jump forward a little bit to 1993 and we see Superman take on this unstoppable bad guy. Now obviously Superman was able to take down the bad guy because he's, you know, Superman, but both Doomsday and Superman ended up succumbing to their injuries at the end of the fight. While some heroes have been resurrected multiple times, this was the first and only time that Clark Kent bit the dust, and it sent shockwaves through the entire world of comics. The aftermath of the story followed how the world reacted and who showed up to take his place, the latter part featuring the introduction of several new characters who stuck around to help form the later DCU. Death of Superman is one of the most far-reaching media events in comics history, and that coupled with the return of Superman changed the rules for DC forever, opening the door for anyone to come back to life. Check out the storyline for yourself so you can see firsthand what this death meant to the DC universe, starting with 1992 Superman The Man of Steel Volume 1, number 18. Number 2. Crisis on Infinite Earths. By the mid-1980s, many of DC's superheroes had been around for about 50 years, and things were starting to get a little bit confusing. Early versions of characters didn't match up with later versions, and the comics had way too many continuity problems regarding ages, time periods, powers. There were just little flaws in continuity everywhere, especially with their bigger characters. Now while most fans were willing to overlook these flaws, it was becoming more and more problematic with each passing year. Crisis on Infinite Earths changed the whole landscape of the DC universe and served as the first time a comic book company would reboot its entire continuity in order to revamp everything. Crisis on Infinite Earths essentially wiped out all of these continuity issues, the multiverse, and even several characters, because, you know, back when character deaths actually meant something, giving us a streamlined, consistent DC universe for the first time in a very long time. The storyline itself brought together heroes from all over DC's universes to battle the Anti-Monitor, and ended with some major deaths. As well as resetting the DC universe and revitalizing characters and storylines, Crisis was one of the first major overarching comic book crossover events. It really goes without saying, but if you haven't read this storyline yet, then you're truly missing out, so check out 1985's Crisis on Infinite Earths number 1, all the way to 1986's Crisis on Infinite Earths number 12. And number 1, massive layoffs. This is actually something that Amanda brought to my attention, and when I read more about it, I knew this had to be at the top of our list today. Taking place in early to mid-August, so this month, there were rumors going around that DC had not only laid off a ton of employees, they'd also completely shut down DC Collectibles. Described as an absolute bloodbath by reporters everywhere, those said to have lost their positions are Editor-in-Chief Bob Harris, Senior VP of Publishing Strategies and Support Services Hank Cannells, VP of Marketing and Creative Services Jonah Wieland, VP Global Publishing Initiatives and Digital Strategy Bobby Chase, Senior Story Editor Brian Cunningham, and Executive Director Mark Doyle, who oversaw the rollout of the Black Label graphic novels. That's not even including the other 600 employees that lost their jobs as well, so needless to say, this is a hefty bunch of people who lost their jobs. For now though, it does remain to be seen just how much these layoffs will affect DC and how the publishers will bounce back.
Number 10. Mystique betrays Sabretooth. So while Mystique and Sabretooth were on a mission to assassinate a scientist in East Berlin, Sabretooth thought he was completing the mission with Lenny Zauber. Lenny had already been dead by this point, so Mystique decided to sneak in there and take their place. Classic Mystique. So Mystique, aka not Lenny, finished the mission, and the pair laid low for a while in a safe location. They eventually became lovers. Ah, how cute. Nothing gets you in the mood better than some assassinations. They ended up becoming lovers, but Mystique faked her own death to get out of there. I feel like faking your own death could work in a lot of situations. I mean, if you sleep in, running late from work, boom, just say you died, it's easy. So yeah, during this time with Sabretooth, they ended up giving birth to none other than Graydon Creed. You would think being the son of two mutants, you would be riddled with powers. False. He had no powers, so Mystique decided to, just abandon him. Naturally, Graydon grew up with some built-up anger towards his parents. That ends up turning into hatred for all of mutants. So, down the line, once he became a successful politician and leader of the Friends of Humanity organization, Graydon is assassinated by, you guessed it, Mystique. A time-traveling version of her, that is. in order to fix some time paradox.
Number 9. Mystique betrays Rogue. I mean, there are a lot of times that Mystique has betrayed her adopted daughter, although Mystique does seemingly betray Rogue, mostly in an attempt to protect her at least. One of the worst betrayals we've seen where Rogue ultimately decided to denounce Mystique as her adoptive mother was when Mystique, using the precognitive knowledge of Destiny's diaries, attempted to save Rogue's life. Sounds weird to consider this a betrayal, but hear me out. This was during Messiah Complex. Rogue had fallen into a coma, overwhelmed by all the consciousness and psyches in her mind, which she had absorbed using her powers. Mystique knew that Rogue would surely die if she didn't take action, but Destiny had prophesied a cure for their daughter. The touch of the baby mutant Messiah, who we now know as Hope Summers, would save her. Mystique stole the child and used it to awaken Rogue, but Rogue was pissed. Why? Because in using the child to awaken Rogue, Mystique had endangered its life, as Rogue's powers could have potentially killed the baby. Now, they didn't, but she was still pretty livid, calling Mystique selfish and touching her with her own hands out of anger at her adoptive mother to punish her. She drained Mystique's powers and her consciousness and nearly killed Mystique in the process. Side note, don't piss off Rogue.
Number 8. Mystique betrays Wolverine. We go back, way back. I'm talking to Wolverine Volume 3, Issue 65, that is. So it's 1921, Kansas City. Mystique and Logan are hiding from the police. And while they try and kill everybody who is part of Mystique's gang, but until this point, they all thought that Mystique had sold them out. That's important. It was later revealed that Logan had actually spilled the beans the whole time. So Mystique ended up still getting away because, well, she's Mystique. Cut to Logan sitting on a train alone, or so he thought. Then he looks over and sees that Mystique is there with him. Sorry, what? She then reveals that she knew everything all along, including the fact that it was Logan who had tipped off the police. She then kicks Logan off the train. Bam, surprise, now you're walking. And she even praises Logan, saying, "Believe it or not, I'm not even angry with you. You made a smart play selling us out. I can't fault you for that." Followed by a let's bygones be bygones talk. What do you say? And then she decides just to hoof him off the train in the snow. Ouch. That's just cold. Literally cool.
Number 7. Doomsday. While Doomsday and the Hulk bear some differences, a big one being that Doomsday is traditionally a villain, whereas Hulk is usually more recognized as a hero, they also bear similarities too. Both were created through experimentation, one an accident, one on purpose. Both are super strong, monster-like creatures, and they even bear a resemblance to one another. Doomsday is gray, which actually was the color Stan Lee originally wanted for the Hulk's appearance. However, when problems surrounding this desire arose, they turned the Hulk green instead. When Doomsday first fully appeared in Superman the Man of Steel issue 18, he was seen wearing a containment suit. And while Doomsday might be gray, his containment suit was very green, which all added to his Hulk-like appearance, in my opinion. Of course, the suit was likely added to create intrigue as to who or what was lurking within it. But still, it's interesting that DC decided to pick the color green as opposed to any other color. There's a lot of other colors out there, folks. Number 6. Doomed. If you thought Doomsday was a Hulk ripoff and you're feeling me there, you are going to love this one. Doomed was created when Metropolis University student Riser was infected with the Doomsday virus, similar to other versions of the virus we've seen pop up in the comics, but not quite as deadly as the one from the Dark Multiverse. Instead of killing Riser, it transformed him into a monster-like creature known as Doomed. He had similar powers to Doomsday, but has never really been considered a villain, more of a hero. Immediately after his transformation, Doom was forced to flee the authorities, who saw him as a monster due to the accidents that he caused, despite the fact that Doomed attempted to actually save those that he had endangered, and he didn't intend to create any of that chaos. Riser would transition between his Doomsday form and human form and would end up being affiliated with the Teen Titans for a time. Number 5. Loose Cannon. This Hulk ripoff even has his strength levels similarly tied to his emotions. The angrier he gets, the bigger and stronger he gets. Loose Cannon was created by Jeff Loeb and Lee Moder, and is basically a big blue version of Hulk who was originally the human Eddie Walker. Walker regained the use of his legs, which had been disabled in a car accident, when his metahuman gene was activated, turning him into the hero known as Loose Cannon, who was later redesigned during New 52 to be a Teen Titans villain instead. Eddie's skin has also been known to change color with his mood as well, and while he does appear to be similar to the Hulk in terms of powers, transformation, and abilities, he also bears a striking resemblance to Hank McCoy, the bouncing blue beast of Marvel's X-Men, especially his New Earth design. Number 4. Damage. Ever wondered what would happen if Captain America's exposure to the super soldier serum actually turned him into a monster? Well, wonder no more. DC has the answer to your question with one of their very own Hulk ripoffs. Damage is Ethan Avery, a youngster who grew up admiring superheroes and wanting to be just like them. At one point during his time serving in the military, he was offered an opportunity to become just that, and of course, jumped at it. He volunteered for the Damage program, a program that used experimental procedures in an attempt to create superheroes. Ethan passed all the necessary tests after applying and was given the Damage serum, which transformed him for 1 hour each day into a super strong, monster-like creature who bears a striking resemblance to the Hulk, down to his tattered pants. While in this form, Ethan would have very little control and basically adopt another rage-fueled berserker persona, also similar to the Hulk. Number 3. Behemoth. Behemoth comes to us from DC's Earth 8. He was basically designed to be a mock version of the Hulk. He's pretty much parody Hulk, where instead of Hulk being a big, ripped, muscly giant, he's a big, blue, oversized man baby. Literally. He even wears a diaper. Behemoth was created by Grant Morrison, who tweaked the world of Earth 8 to make it basically be DC's alternate universe version of Marvel 616. On Earth 8, Behemoth is part of a team known as the Retaliators. I wonder what famous Marvel team that name could be referring to. The Retaliators. Number 2. Monster. Monster was introduced during Superman/Batman. He was basically a big green powerful monster who was possessed by Kryptonite Man and created by Joker and Mr. Mxyzptlk, who had seemingly teamed up to take down both of their sworn enemies, Batman and Superman. Seemingly. Monster wasn't the only one they created, however. No. He was part of a team known as the Maximums, a parallel to Marvel's Ultimate Supers originating from Earth 1610. All you have to do is look at Monster though to really see how much of a ripoff of the original Hulk he really is. Number 1. Smash. Smash was basically Rob Liefeld's attempt at salvaging work he'd already completed but was unable to use. Liefeld had been working with Marvel previously on Captain America stuff, but when Liefeld kept apparently missing deadlines and sales ended up being not where Marvel had hoped, they let him go. The book was moved over to Wildstorm, and Liefeld's direction for the plot was pretty much fully abandoned, but he still found a way to make use of the work that he had already done, creating a new character for the comic Fighting American with Awesome Comics, which was started by Liefeld. Smash, which looked a lot like another very familiar Marvel powerhouse, but purple instead of green, and wearing a chain around his neck. That's about it.
Coming in at number 10, we've got Tales from the Crypt. And why not start with a bona fide classic? Sure, most folks know it from the TV show now, but it all originated with the comic. Throughout the 50s, EC Comics put out all sorts of horror anthology comics with tales about as varied as you'd expect. Credited along other horror classics like Eerie and Creepy with bringing comics back from the brink after World War II, Tales from the Crypt effectively used horror to captivate audiences all over the place. Most folks associate Tales with the one and only Crypt Keeper, especially those who were introduced to the series through the TV show. But in the original run of comics, there were 3 figures introducing us to macabre tales, each with their own unique personality and distaste for the other hosts. So many classic horror stories are packed into Tales from the Crypt, and that's not even taking into account how forward-thinking they were. Like all good horror, Tales takes shots at the establishment and the status quo, questioning why things are the way they are. While maybe a little outdated, this is a classic comic that set the standard for things to come. Coming in at number 9, we've got Fatale. Now for something a little newer. Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips' Fatale. This is a wild postmodern crossover involving all sorts of awesome horror stuff. First, we've got the noir elements, seedy criminal underbelly, lots of shadows, and a femme fatale protagonist. Then we've got some Lovecraftian intrigue folded in. And of course, it's all done up in a 50s style, adding to the timeless feel of it all. We follow Jo, a seemingly immortal woman who's been chased for decades by a Lovecraftian cult. Jo has the power to make men fall irreversibly in love with her, whether or not she wants that to happen. Usually the men that fall for this femme fatale also put their lives on the line for her and end up dying in terrifying and grotesque ways. It's the classic noir story told from a different angle. Femme fatale has man fall for her, feels bad, and then witnesses his demise. The eldritch themes are strong within the world of Fatale, and some of these scares are downright disturbing. The tone and feel of it is something special for sure. Check it out if you like throwbacks, film noir, or horror. It's sure to impress on all counts. Coming in at number 8, we've got Gideon Falls. Part twin Twin Peaks, part word-of-mouth creepypasta, Gideon Falls feels like something totally new and crazy. Put together by Jeff Lemire and Andrea Sorrentino, this is a horror story driven by the exploration of evil rather than gore and gristle. We meet Norton Sinclair, an amalgam of the worst parts of Lemire and Sorrentino, as he explores the urban legend of the Black Barn. This structure pops up throughout time and space in order to foretell death and destruction, madness and mayhem. Of course, that's only the first story. This continuing comic will keep going up until December with new information, but then it shall wrap up. There's plenty of catching up to do though, so get on it quick. Just be prepared to feel the terror flow through you.
Number 7. White Knight. This is a fun one. Imagine if Joker was the good guy and Batman was the bad. Okay, well in Batman White Knight #1, released in December 2017, we get to see this. Written by Sean Murphy, this story finds Joker as the hero. And this Batman is reckless. He's destroying the city just to get close to him. Once Batman gets his hands on Joker, the Joker tricks Batman into drugging him so that he can be sane again, becoming Jack Napier. So the Joker at this point actually outsmarts Batman. Ooh! He uses legal knowledge to convince Jim Gordon to arrest him for all this crazy stuff that he's doing just to get to him. This same Joker was still after Batman, so he used the Mad Hatter's control device to do a lot of his dirty work. Nightwing and Batgirl even joined in on the cause to bring in the Caped Crusader. This is a great version of Joker to see. Reviews for the story have been mainly positive. What did you guys think? Let us know below.
Number 6. Dr. Doom becomes Iron Man. Following the events of Doom's battle world, Doom realized that not even becoming a god had made him feel any sense of accomplishment. Feeling empty inside, Doom reflected perhaps it was his approach that had always been off, and decided to set off on a path of redemption, attempting to become one of the good guys. As a symbol of turning over a new leaf, he shed his armor and became an ally of Tony Stark, a man he'd always secretly admired. When Tony was left in a coma following the events of the Second Civil War, Doom surprised readers, shocking all of us Doom fans in a good way by becoming infamous Iron Man. As Iron Man, Doom was a force to be reckoned with and one all villains seemed terrified of, and for good reason. Having Doom as a rival villain was hard enough, but having him as a hero meant that they would need to come together just to defend themselves against his might. And even then, these villains failed. Doom single-handedly took them out during a meeting where they'd all gathered to discuss the problem of Doom himself. Number 5. Death of Spider-Man. I'm not sure what was more shocking, when Spider-Man died the first time in Ultimates and had to immediately be resurrected because the timing had not been properly communicated, or when he died the second time with all the grandiose surrounding his death. The Ultimate Universe of 1610 was full of shocking moments, Spider-Man's death among them. In reality, the creatives wanted Spider-Man dead because they felt he was too similar to his 616 counterpart, and they were trying to get rid of all the characters who they felt were just too similar to the main continuity versions. Still, the death of Spider-Man made for a shocking title, even if it was in an alternate universe, as Peter Parker's Spider-Man was still considered the darling of Marvel, no matter which reality you're talking about. Number 4. Black Widow betrays Iron Man. Another Ultimate story that shocked many fans was the whole relationship and then subsequent betrayal between fellow Avengers Iron Man and Black Widow. On Earth 1610, these two were about to get married when Black Widow revealed her true colors. In this reality, she was a double agent and killed Jarvis before Tony could even stop her. Fortunately, he still had override systems in place on the nanobots he'd given Natasha, which helped her to control the armor he'd gifted her as an engagement gift. He used these nanobots to knock Natasha out, and when she came to the hospital, Clint Barton, aka Hawkeye, arrived to take her out with an arrow to the head. In betraying her teammate, she'd also gotten Clint's family, which he had in Ultimates, killed, so he was out for revenge on multiple levels. Number 3. Iron Man, evil all along. Dun dun dun. The Crossing was a super out there storyline, one where it was revealed that Tony Stark had actually been a sleeper agent all along for Kang the Conqueror, who we later learned wasn't even really Kang but was a Mortis in disguise. Oh, comics. Tony went around being a huge villain for a while until he lay dying, inspired by his younger self to reform before he passed away. His younger self had been brought to the present by the Avengers to stop their version of Tony. Yeah, it was a time. I hope the Avengers learned that bringing a younger, less experienced Tony to defeat an older version who is a more accomplished genius is not really the best way to go in this scenario. Number 2. Thor gets hella pregnant. When did this happen? You guessed it, in the Ultimate Universe. Should just call this top 10 Marvel shocking moments of the Ultimate Universe. In the Ultimate Universe, however, Thor and Hela do not appear to be related, so at least there is that. But still, this is a shocking story for those who just happened to pick up a comic off the rack at the time. What happened was Thor wanted to leave Valhalla. In order to do so, he had to give Hela an heir, which was a term he agreed to. Yikes. Number 1. Return of Bucky Barnes. Bucky Barnes was one of the exceptions when it came to comic book character deaths. With most characters, there is always the expectation that the day will come where they will inevitably return, no matter how finite their death may have seemed or how many times the character has seemingly perished. However, Bucky's death was one of the few that was accepted as permanent. In truth, it had happened because Marvel wanted to move away from the idea of child sidekicks. Stan Lee especially was not a fan of that concept. In fact, you'll notice a good many of Marvel's heroes have been without kid sidekicks throughout Marvel history because of this. In 2005, Ed Brubaker made comic book history when he gave us the story of the Winter Soldier, resurrecting Bucky as a brainwashed assassin, bringing back one of the few characters who we expected to stay dead for good, alongside Marvel's Uncle Ben. But don't worry, Ed Brubaker did not bring back Uncle Ben. Uncle Ben's still pretty dead. What's more, Brubaker created an ending that could easily allow us to keep Winter Soldier or discard him based on how fans received this story. For Brubaker, the reasoning as well was that if Cap could have come back, then why couldn't Bucky? Also, we never saw him die on panel, so. Fortunately, this story that he told, while shocking, was well received, and so Bucky Barnes as the Winter Soldier returned for good. Woohoo!
Number 10. Superman and Wonder Woman's carnal embrace. Hopefully we all know who Frank Miller is, one of the most influential and popular creators in comics today, having wrote and illustrated Batman The Dark Knight Returns and The Dark Knight Strikes Again. Ring a bell? Okay, good. Well, Frank Miller was also responsible for one of DC's most disturbing moments when he portrayed Superman and Wonder Woman, how should I say this, getting it on? All things considered, we've probably seen worse, right? After all, DC had Superman and Wonder Woman dating as part of their New 52 continuity, so it should come as no surprise that the two would, you know. However, Frank Miller's over-the-top writing showed that this act was actually killing an untold number of people. How, you might ask? Well, in one specific case, as these two godlike beings fly up in the air and crash down to Earth during the act, we see earthquakes erupting all over the planet, hurricanes forming, tsunamis going nuts, and Hawaii was actually completely evacuated. All for the payoff of a super dumb pun, with Wonder Woman noting that the Earth moved. But sure, it's a cute joke, but how many people died due to the carelessness of these two? Now, I couldn't find the exact issue that this takes place in, but I know what happens in The Dark Knight Returns, so if you know it or can find the issue, post it in the comments below so we can all check it out for ourselves. Number 9. No More Watchmen. In the last issue of the original Watchmen limited series entitled A Strong and Loving World, we get a truly shocking reveal. Ozymandias was actually the bad guy all along. Turns out he was responsible for the deaths of thousands in New York, the death of the comedian, the accusations on Dr. Manhattan, and the framing of Moloch. Sure, that is shocking to say the least, but there's actually more, as it's what happens after that that's truly shocking. Now, don't get me wrong, Ozymandias' intentions were good. He did all that he could to prevent a nuclear war between the Soviet Union and the US. But it was still an injustice for Rorschach, and he wanted to expose Ozymandias. Setting out to do so, Rorschach encounters Dr. Manhattan and tells him exactly what happened. Dr. Manhattan tries to stop Rorschach from exposing Ozymandias, but Rorschach responded by saying that Manhattan had to kill him first in order to stop him. Now, in a shocking turn of events, Dr. Manhattan actually vaporized Rorschach and chose to believe in Ozymandias' cause instead. If you haven't already read this limited series, I highly recommend that you go back and check it out, starting with 1986's Watchmen, number 1. Number 8. Emerald Twilight. In the mid-90s, DC decided that it was finally time for the second and most well-known Green Lantern, Hal Jordan, to step down from the mantle so that it could be passed on to someone else. So how did DC decide to end the career of one of their most beloved heroes? Well, they couldn't just send him off quietly. Of course they had to turn him into a villain of some sorts, undoing pretty much all of the good he's ever done. In the reign of Superman's storyline, which took place after the death of Superman's storyline, Hal's home of Coast City was completely destroyed by the villains Mongol and Cyborg Superman. As a result, the city was demolished and its 7 million citizens were killed. This turn of events made Hal completely lose it, and he believed that if he could steal all the main power batteries' energy, the source of the Green Lantern's rings, he could permanently rebuild Coast City. To do so, he killed all of the remaining Green Lantern Corps and the villain Sinestro, which led to him becoming the villain Parallax. To DC's credit though, they later redeemed Hal by having him sacrifice his life to restart the sun during the Final Night storyline, and revealing that his madness had been caused by being possessed by an entity made of fear. Hal would later go on to reform the Green Lantern Corps thanks to the expert guidance of Jeff Johns, but Emerald Twilight does still remain a black spot on DC's legacy. Check out this insane storyline for yourself in 1994's Green Lantern Volume 3, number 48 all the way to number 50.
Number 7. Kingpin learns of Daredevil's secret identity. This was an especially shocking story arc. Known as Born Again, in this story, Daredevil's secret identity is sold out by his ex-girlfriend Karen Page, who had become a heroin addict and, while desperate, sold his true identity for a hit. This information got passed around and eventually made its way back to Kingpin. It's never good when your arch-nemesis finds out your secret civilian identity, but for Matt Murdock, this was one of the worst things that would ever happen to him. Kingpin used this information to destroy Daredevil's life on pretty much every level, taking his money and his home, and even using it to destroy his relationship with his current girlfriend, and even destroy his costume. Geez, guy had nothing left. Eventually, Wilson Fisk would get what was coming to him, but before that would happen, he would still make protecting and living in Hell's Kitchen a living hell for Matt Murdock. Number 6. Wolverine loses his adamantium. There have been quite a few shocking moments that have come to us from 90s comics, but one of the most dramatic and also the weirdest thereafter was when Magneto stripped all the adamantium from Wolverine's skeleton, pulling it out of his body. This was insanely painful for Wolverine, but he managed to survive the forced debonding process. However, it left him somewhat changed, and he almost died during the process. Wolverine became more animalistic and also lost his nose for some reason. Wolverine would remain without his adamantium and sort of without his nose for almost 8 years, which is also pretty crazy to think about, especially when it's considered such an iconic part of Wolverine's power set. Not his nose, his adamantium. Although he does have superhuman senses, so I guess his nose is part of his power set. Oh my goodness. Number 5. No more mutants. Wanda is kind of the queen of shocking moments. Her magic is often unpredictable, resulting in many twists and turns to come about in the comics. But aside from its unpredictability, it's also very powerful, meaning that when Wanda does manage to get her magic right, it still usually gives us very shocking results. That was the case when Wanda had a psychotic break and created an alternate reality which began to crack and crumble as those supers within it began to see it for what it was. A fake reality, created and shaped by Wanda herself, a sham. Frustrated with her father Magneto's obsession to fight for mutant kind, she then altered reality once more as everyone seemed to be coming for her, speaking the words, "No more mutants" in the House of M series. This day, November 2nd, would become known as M Day in the Marvel Universe, the day when millions of mutants lost their powers, and we still see the consequences for many characters involved in the comics even today, almost 15 years later. Pretty crazy considering how many events get retconned out of existence almost. Number 4. Carnage becomes a hero? During the events of Axis, everyone had their alignments reversed when Wanda's magic went haywire like it usually does. Chaos magic? Nah, what you gonna do? Carnage as such became a hero, referring to himself as your friendly neighborhood Carnage, and attempting to fight for good like his usual nemesis, Spider-Man. The disturbing thing about his alignment reversal was that it didn't make Cletus Cassidy any less of a murdering psychopath. He still had those urges and had to fight to overcome them. Surprisingly, however, he behaved heroically enough that he was compelled to sacrifice himself in order to save the population of New York when the evil X-Men planted a gene bomb that would kill everyone in the city who wasn't a mutant. Pretty impressive. And he died, and then of course he came back because, well, it's still a comic book. How many times has Carnage lost his legs? That's some trivia for people. Answer me in the comments. How many times? Number 3. Spider-Man reveals his identity. Spider-Man did this as part of the Civil War story arc in order to help motivate other supers to do so and to support his friend and in a way mentor Tony Stark, who at the time was on the side of being for the Superhuman Registration Act, believing being against it would only lead to an all-out war with the government and be worse for supers later on. This was one of the most memorable and shocking moments of that event, outside of, Tony and Cap full on fighting one another and going to all-out war. Spider-Man revealed his secret identity to the world during a press conference, prompting his boss at the Daily Bugle, J.J. Jameson, who had always considered Spider-Man a menace and an enemy, to promptly fire him. His unmasking also gave Iron Man and his supporters the fuel they needed to build concentration camps in the negative zone for non-registered super folks. Yeah. Pretty controversial move there. Spider-Man would eventually get his secret identity back during another shocking and controversial for different reasons story, One More Day. But that's a tale for another list. Maybe a part 4. Number 2. Iron Man is working for Kang. Or really, Iron Man is working for Immortus. During the crossing, widely regarded as one of the most bizarre storylines from the 90s, it was revealed that Tony had become a villain and sleeper agent for Kang the Conqueror. In another attempt at a shocking twist, it would later be revealed that Kang was actually Immortus and that Immortus was actually Iron Lad, but this wouldn't be revealed until later. And let's be real, none of that was really that shocking to us. I don't think many people cared. Some of the costume redesigns that were part of the crossing were also equally shocking, just in terms of how 90s they were. Just check out Scarlet Witch's costume from this time. Everybody's gotta have trench coats. That's the 90s. Number 1. Magneto, you are not the father. During the events of Axis, we also learned that Wanda and Pietro were not actually the blood relatives of Magneto, and were not even mutants. This all came about when Scarlet Witch attempted to perform some blood magic on her family members. It worked on Pietro, but not on Magnus. Fans would later learn this was because Wanda and Pietro were not actually mutants' children. In fact, they weren't even mutants. The High Evolutionary had experimented on them when they were just babies, and had simply disguised them as mutants and returned them after he was finished with his experimentation. This is still definitely one of my most disliked retcons in comic book history. Since this has been revealed, Scarlet Witch has become even more reviled by the superhero and mutant community, being referred to as a pretender and despised by most mutants. I just feel really bad for Wanda. This woman cannot get a break in the comics. Can we just give Wanda a break? Can Wanda be cool? Could she be cool again?
Number 10. Maxwell Lord Infinite Crisis. In the pages of Countdown to Infinite Crisis, the Blue Beetle is left near bankruptcy after funds from his company were mysteriously stolen. His investigation into his missing fortune yields something much darker though, a conspiracy to wipe out the superhuman community orchestrated by the Justice League International's former manager, Maxwell Lord. Now, he had enjoyed his influence over the Justice League and the formation of the Justice League International in the wake of Crisis on Infinite Earths. He was a wealthy and powerful businessman and claimed to have learned nobility and compassion from his late father, Maxwell Lord III. All of this pointed to him as a very genuine figure out to help keep Earth safe, but I guess we were wrong. During the Invasion saga, Lord acquires the superpower of mind control, and things only get worse from there. The build up to Infinite Crisis saw many shocking events occur in the DC universe, including Lord's brutal murder of Ted Kord, aka Blue Beetle II. Lord's betrayal continued to damage the League throughout Infinite Crisis, with Lord stealing Batman's metahuman satellite to hunt down every superhuman on Earth with an army of cyborgs at its disposal. Wonder Woman straight up just murders him though after he mind controls Superman into assaulting his fellow Leaguers. As a last laugh after death, footage of Wonder Woman snapping his neck leaks worldwide, causing her to be alienated from the rest of the League. Number 9. Flash Out of Time and End of the Road. In a possible future, this iteration of the Flash is a much darker Barry Allen with 20 years in the future. This future Flash first appears in the Flash Annual Volume 4 Number 3 as a broken man. Reeling from the death of a close friend and fellow speedster Wally West, future Flash travels backwards through time on a crusade to murder all of the former enemies he deems responsible for West's death, hoping to somehow change the future. His actions only widen a tear in the Speed Force, however, and the once hero ultimately decides to use a present-day Barry Allen's energy to seal the rift. Proving his superiority in a one-on-one battle against the present-day Barry, the pair are soon interrupted by the arrival of Wally West himself. Able to take on both speedsters at once, Future Flash's actions caused the one thing he began his quest to stop: the death of Wally West. Barry killed numerous rogues along the way before learning the error of his ways with help from his past girlfriend Patty Spivot, and eventually gave his life to save the present-day Barry Allens. Number 8. Gambit Mutant Massacre. Deciding if Gambit deserves a spot on this list today was a bit tough because although he is a member of the X-Men, he's a notorious thief with a reputation for stealing the most impossible of objects. Not to mention all of, the other terrible stuff that he's done. Amanda, however, was able to convince me that he is still technically a hero, and that's why he's showing up here today. Although he wasn't technically a member of the team quite yet, I'm still counting his actions that led to the Mutant Massacre event as a betrayal towards the X-Men. Gambit aided the evil Mr. Sinister in his plans in exchange for having a piece of his brain removed to allow him to have better control over his powers. Gambit formed the Marauders, a group of superpowered mercenaries, and led them to the Morlock tunnels, resulting in the event Mutant Massacre. Gambit's sins were finally aired out though in the early 2000s, and all of it seems to be somewhat forgiven, but that being said, I still feel it's worth remembering that Gambit's first canonical act was betraying the X-Men.
Number 7. Nick Fury becomes a Watcher. Basically, the story here is that the villain known as Orb, working with a few other villains, was jealous of Uatu the Watcher and decided to shoot him and steal his eyes eye so that he could have the power of a Watcher. However, when Nick Fury found out about this tragedy, he immediately went to investigate as he did not know who was behind the ordeal. The Watcher actually refused to tell Fury what he knew, as it was not really his role to do so, only to watch and observe, not to interfere, even when he himself had been interfered with. That is some respect right there. He's like, this is my job, that's it, even if I'm kind of bleeding and maybe dying. Because of this, Fury felt he had no choice and killed the Watcher and stole his other eye, which contained Uatu's memories, in order to try to figure out who was responsible for the previous theft and for attacking Uatu. Eventually, Fury managed to get the confession he sought and discovered the orb was responsible. One of the other villains the orb had been with at the time, Dr. Midas, returned to the Watcher's citadel in order to absorb even more power from Uatu's corpse. Fury overloaded him using the power of the eye that was in his possession. This resulted in an explosion that seemingly killed both Midas and Fury, but in the end it was discovered that Fury had survived. As punishment for his sins, because all of this took place in the original Sin story, the Watchers turned him into Uatu's replacement, forcing him to be the chained observer of Earth known as the Unseen. Number 6. Civil War. Not the second one though, that one was much less of a shock, I think. But the first Civil War got people excited while also amazing them when it first came out. Captain America and Iron Man had always kind of been at odds, but they were also friends and colleagues who had worked side by side for years as part of the Avengers. The notion that these two would be declaring all-out war on the other was pretty huge, especially when it came to the politics of what was going on, where Stark was advocating for his Superhuman Registration Act, or the Superhuman Registration Act. Kinda became his later though. Which would demand more accountability for heroes and would basically make them all government agents. Iron Man believed this could help to prevent potential casualties during world-threatening situations and events. Cap, however, did not believe that superhumans needed to be restricted and stood for freedom of superhumans. In the end, Captain America looked at the damage the war had caused and decided to surrender, but was seemingly assassinated by a time-traveling bullet on his way to prison, which ends the war. I could explain more about the time-traveling bullet, but that would be a whole other video, really. Number 5. Death of the Ultimate Universe. So we all kinda saw this one coming, but it was still shocking. While the ultimate alternate universe of Earth 1610 was one that had a lot of weird problem areas, it also gave us a lot of great and inventive takes on characters and some really cool moments. So despite the fact that it had kind of been run into the ground, many fans were still left flabbergasted when the line was cancelled after years of existing and being considered relatively successful. Sure, we still gotta keep some of our favorite characters from 1610 like Miles Morales and the villainous Reed Richards known as the Maker, but it was still shocking to know that almost everything and everyone else from that universe was gone forever. Even heartbreaking for some. R.I.P. Ultimates. You live on in our dreams. Number 4. Spider-Woman revealed as Skrull Queen. Skrulls have been a known shape-shifting race in the comics since they were first introduced in Fantastic Four issue 2 in the 1960s, but that doesn't mean that their almost completely secret invasion of Earth didn't shock and surprise us. Secret Invasion was an event that made everyone question everything they knew. No one was to be trusted because you didn't know if who you were talking to, or even thought you had known for years, could secretly have been a Skrull. Needless to say, when it was finally revealed the Skrull Queen had actually been hiding disguised as accomplished Avenger and sometimes detective Jessica Drew, aka Spider-Woman, people were shocked. Even more surprising was the fact that Norman Osborn, of all people, was the one to take her out. Number 3. Gwen Stacy and Norman Osborn's ship. During the Sins Past story, it was revealed that Gwen Stacy had a secret and kinda creepy relationship with Norman Osborn. Ew. And that this relationship resulted in the birth of 2 twins. Osborn had sent Stacy to Paris to birth the 2 twins, and this all happened before, I believe, her relationship with Peter. After her death, the existence of her and Osborn's children remained unknown to Peter, but Osborn convinced the twins, whom he raised in secret, that Spider-Man was both their father and also responsible for their mother's death, turning them into his own minions and goblins. This whole story is pretty shocking and is very icky. Number 2. Captain America becomes Hydra Supreme. The Cosmic Cube became a sentient entity resembling a little girl known as Kobik. S.H.I.E.L.D. had hoped to use the shards that created her form to manipulate reality as they saw fit. Unfortunately, this plan did not work out for them. Red Skull managed to influence the girl into warping reality to turn Captain America into a long-time Hydra sleeper agent. And so we got the shocking story where it was revealed that all this time Cap had been working for the evil organization of Hydra. That one panel where Cap says, "Hail Hydra?" Yeah, that was a real thing that happened. Cap would actually succeed in infiltrating and conquering the United States government, becoming the reigning Hydra Supreme, but would later be defeated by main continuity Captain America, who still lived within the Cosmic Cube. This version of Cap would return and defeat his alternate evil self. Whew. Thank goodness. Number 1. Miss Marvel's surprise pregnancy. I wish this was a shocking moment that I could forget, and yet I cannot. And I cannot also believe that someone greenlit this story. We learn in issue 197 of Avengers that Carol Danvers as Miss Marvel is pregnant. Not only that, but her pregnancy seems to be progressing along at an alarmingly quick rate. Carol is scared, but is reassured by Wanda, to whom she revealed her secret identity, that she is an Avenger, which means she has a group of friends who will stand by her no matter what. Unfortunately, what that ends up meaning is a group of friends who actually don't really seem to listen to her, celebrating the pregnancy and kind of shaming Carol somewhat for not being happier about it, despite the fact that Carol is terrified and has no earthly idea how this could have happened to her. It's later revealed that her baby, who grows up rapidly and introduces himself as Marcus, is also kind of the man who got her pregnant, or an extension of him anyways, who had to do so in order to use her body as a means of escaping limbo, but then realizes that his presence in the world is too dangerous. What a great plan you had. He ends up returning to limbo, but Carol for some reason decides to come with him so that he won't be alone. At no point do the Avengers really listen to Carol or check in with her or try to help her when she's obviously being manipulated by Marcus, who even confesses that he manipulated her to begin with. Thankfully, Chris Claremont at least wrote an Avengers annual a year later calling out how shockingly bad this story was. Thank you, Claremont. Number 10. Phoenix Saga. Although now we just look back at the Phoenix Saga as being a part of history, at the time it was shocking. Jean Grey merged with a cosmic force that saved her from dying in outer space, attracting the presence we have come to know as the Phoenix Force. This Phoenix Force would later be revealed to now be a part of Jean, granting her great power. She became known as having the power of a god and then turned dark and became an insane supervillain, and then she died. And she had been one of the founding members of the X-Men. This was big stuff. Of course, Jean wouldn't stay dead, which would end up only shocking readers even more in the future when she did return, especially as it meant that Cyclops would abandon his happy home life with Jean's clone, Madeline Pryor, who he had married and kinda also had a child with. Bad Scott Summers, bad Scott. Number 9. Death of Hulk. The difference between Jean's death during the Dark Phoenix Saga and that of Hulk's death during Civil War II is one felt at least like it was kinda coming from somewhere. We all knew that Bruce Banner at the time had been working to cure himself of his Hulk transformation. Amadeus Cho had ended up even trying to help his friend by trying to remove the gamma radiation from Bruce and take it into himself, turning him into the totally awesome Hulk, a more emotionally balanced version of the hero. Bruce Banner even gave Hawkeye a special Hulk killing arrow in case he ever began to transform once more, and instructed that Hawkeye should kill him should that come to pass. However, we don't really learn about this until after Hawkeye has done the deed. Instead, a tense argument with Bruce is interrupted by his swift death. Of course, Bruce Banner and his Hulk would be back, but at the moment he died, readers were likely thinking, wait, did I just read that right? Did Bruce's companion and friend Clint Barton just kill him? And yes, he did. He did do that. Even he was shocked. Number 8. Death of Wolverine. The death of an unkillable and one of the most popular heroes? This one caught a lot of people off guard initially and likely helped to boost sales just from that title alone. Everyone wanted to know how Wolverine's story would end. Of course, once again, this is comics, so Wolverine's death would not end up being permanent. Because, yeah, he is one of the most popular characters, so obviously we're not gonna let him stay dead. In the end, it was adamantium that was Wolverine's undoing. The very thing that had made him so tough over the years also ended up killing him. Wolverine was without his healing factor after a microverse virus deactivated it, and learned that, well, there was also a bounty on his head. While other brilliant minds rushed to fix Wolverine's healing factor, Logan was resigned to his fate, not showing any desire for having it brought back. He tracked down the one responsible for the bounty on his head, and during the confrontation ended up rushing to save Weapon X test subjects and victims from having the deadly adamantium bonding process that he had actually gone through years before. Slashing the tanks of adamantium caused him to become covered in the liquid metal, which hardened and encased him, suffocating and killing him. What a way to go. But like I said, he would return. And with random burning hot claws to boot. Never forget that he has hot claws, though they never really come up. Number 7. Carnage. To be honest, Carnage has had a few shocking assumed deaths over the recent years. One of these happened during the events of Axis when Carnage's alignment was inverted. Carnage took on the mantle of your friendly neighborhood Carnage and set out to try and be a hero, which was already surprising and disturbing enough, especially considering that Cletus Cassidy was still psychopathic and still had violent urges and tendencies that he struggled against. One of the most surprising moments of Axis was when Carnage helped in the fight against the alignment reversed evil X-Men. who attempted to set off a gene bomb which would kill all humans in the vicinity. I feel like it was a big vicinity, but I'll let people in the comments argue how big that vicinity was. I think it was like all of New York. Spider-Man, who was still a hero, and Carnage were unable to defuse the bomb in time, and so Carnage chose to sacrifice himself, shapeshifting around it to absorb and prevent its blast radius. Of course, we assumed that Carnage had been killed during this noble act, but like most other times when we suspected Cletus dead, he just lost his legs and would later return to his evil ways. Man, how many legs has that guy had? A lot of legs. Number 6. Black Mask. Black Mask had crossed paths with Catwoman before, and he had even tortured her sister Maggie, but he likely never expected Selina to kill him because, well, she thought of herself a hero usually. However, the next time he moved to threaten her, kidnapping and torturing Slam Bradley, a Gotham detective and sometimes ally of Catwoman's, he realized he messed with Selina at the wrong time. The Black Mask ended up taking on Catwoman directly, thinking he had her cornered while he threatened pretty much everyone she loved. Of course, Black Mask was unaware that Catwoman was currently questioning her own alignment, having just discovered that she had been manipulated into becoming a hero by Zatanna. He was as surprised as we were when Catwoman decided to shoot him right in the head, killing him. She was like, am I a hero, am I a villain? Maybe I'm both. You can be both, I think. I think that's a thing. It's called an anti-hero. Number 5. Molecule Man. Owen Reese, aka Molecule Man, was a longtime villain until recently. After his involvement in God Emperor Doom's Battle World, where he was basically kept as a prisoner and used as a power source by Dr. Doom, Reese agreed to help Mr. Fantastic rebuild the multiverse. Using Molecule Man's power, Reed Richards succeeded in doing so, returning the multiverse to the way it was meant to be and kind of improving it in some areas. Unfortunately, during their adventures together, the Future Foundation was set upon by a new villain known as the Griever at the End of All Things, who had her endlings devour Molecule Man's body. Because he had used parts of himself to anchor the multiverse, Molecule Man was no longer as infinite as he once had been, and randomly died at the hands of this new villain. Wow, what a way to go, especially considering he was such a cool villain. Oh well, RIP. Number 4. Joker. Death of the Family was another shocking DC story all around. I mean, it's another huge Joker plot, and shocking is something we've come to expect from Batman's arch nemesis. If you expect it, can it still be shocking? I think so. Joker is one of those villains who almost always gets away. After all, Joker is the most iconic villain and is so popular, it would be truly shocking if DC did something like, I don't know, kill him off? Well, at the end of Death of the Family, that is just what appears to happen. Joker plummets to his death off an underground cliff. And while we all know falling into a pit does not equal death, all nerds should know this, he was presumed dead and would remain so until the events of Endgame in 2017. DC's Endgame, not Marvel's Endgame. Just FYI. Endgame took place, by the way, almost a full 2 years after he went missing at the end of Death of the Family. Of course, in Endgame it would be revealed that Joker was fully restored via a pool of Dionysium found at the bottom of a cliff, and that he'd been laying low disguised as Arkham Asylum orderly Eric Border. But we wouldn't know that till later. Number 3. Darkseid. During the Darkseid War, we saw one of the strongest supervillains, Darkseid, defeated. Pretty impressive. It took a lot, but when the Flash merged with the Black Racer, in addition to exposure to the anti-life equation, Darkseid was finally defeated, and not just defeated, killed. This form of Darkseid would seemingly be gone forever, but in its place we did get a new Darkseid following these events. The baby of Earth 3's villainous Lois Lane, aka Superwoman, and Alexander Luthor, was taken in by Darkseid's daughter, Grail, to be raised as the new Darkseid imbued with Darkseid's essence. Little essence of Darkseid in there. Now you got a new Darkseid baby. Also, it's super weird that Darkseid is raised by his daughter, but whatever. That's weird. Still weirds me out. Number 2. Poison Ivy. Heroes in Crisis gave us multiple shocking deaths, but one such death was shocking not only because it was the death of a major character, but because it completely revamped that character's design and later on led to a different path. Poison Ivy was one of those reported dead in the event at the Sanctuary, and had currently been on a heroic path at the time. She was soon after resurrected using a rose she'd given Harley Quinn by Wally West himself, who actually turned out was responsible for her death. But this time around, she looked completely different when she came back, so both her death and her resurrection were pretty surprising, and this all happened in one story, one event. Number 1. Thanos. Recently, Thanos was killed off randomly in issue 6 of the 2019 Guardians of the Galaxy series. Of course, with Thanos, we know that no death will likely ever be finite for the big guy. But still, the fact that his death wasn't part of some massive event was pretty surprising and shocking. Like, if you weren't reading Guardians of the Galaxy, you might even have not known that this happened. Of course, his final death came hot on the heels of what we thought was already his final death. Gamora had killed him previously in Thanos Legacy issue number 1, even going so far as to behead the Mad Titan, but his lady love at the time, Hela, working with the Black Order, sought to resurrect Thanos. Yeah, Hela and Thanos' relationship is kind of random and sort of emerged from a villainous working relationship originally, though I guess it also makes sense somewhat as Hela is the Asgardian goddess of death, and that's usually something, Thanos is into. It's all about death. Thanos was resurrected, but the process was interrupted, meaning that not all of Thanos' mind had returned to him. In the end, Hela and Thanos ended up sucked into a black hole, so it's also likely that we could see them both again somewhere in the near future, but I feel like usually most people that go into a black hole in real life, you're probably dead. Number 10. Mysterio. All the events surrounding Mysterio's death were pretty nuts. Mysterio took his own life following his failed attempt to corrupt Daredevil. The whole Daredevil plot was also pretty nuts. One, because it was all quite involved as Mysterio tried to ruin Daredevil's life. Poor Matt. Everyone is always trying to ruin his life and mess with his head, and really, the dude has enough problems as is just dealing with past traumas. And 2, Mysterio jumping into a Daredevil story was just something very different, as Mysterio is pretty much exclusively a Spider-Man villain. At the time, Mysterio had already been dying of cancer, and so when his plot failed, he decided his time was done. What was also pretty neat was all the uncertainty surrounding his death. This being Mysterio, many fans were skeptical that he was even dead, with some believing that he'd faked his death. Number 9. Spook. So I was talking with some of the other staff here at Top 10 Nerd, and apparently I'm the only one who is shocked by the passing of the Spook. So if there are other Spook fans out there, please make yourself known in the comments. Help me prove that I'm not the only Spook fan, unless I am. Boy, that would be embarrassing. More for Spook though, I think, than for me. For those who are less familiar with the Spook, he is a Batman villain known for being a master escape artist and for his hypnosis skills. The Spook was known for helping other criminals to escape from prison for a price. He actually helped build Gotham's maximum security prison and would find himself in prison there multiple times after being caught by Batman. Spook is a villain who has been around since the 1970s, and while he's appeared in under 50 issues, it's still always shocking to me when one of the original and older rogues passes away, because it's likely they won't be returning. Such was the case with Spook, who actually had been thought dead much earlier in his criminal career and returned 10 years later, but this time around in issue 657 of Batman, Damian Wayne killed him, taking his head as proof of the deed. Not something one usually comes back from, even if it has been. It's been over 10 years now as well in real life, so I don't think he's coming back. Number 8. Mr. Sinister. During the Messiah Complex storyline, Mr. Sinister was killed both memorably but also somewhat surprisingly. He was betrayed by Mystique, okay, maybe that part of it wasn't super surprising, who used a comatose and dying rogue as a weapon. Now that's kinda surprising. Taking the new mutant Messiah baby, later known as Baby Hope, for herself, and using Rogue's touch to kill Sinister. Not only was this death shocking, but it would help to pave the way for all of Sinister's clones to come.
Number 7. Cyclops Avengers vs. X-Men. First of all, I have to get this out of the way. Man, do I love talking about the Avengers vs. X-Men storyline. The Phoenix Force is heading towards Earth, and the Avengers, obviously fearing the almighty entity, made Iron Man and Giant Man prepare a disruptor weapon to kill the Phoenix Force. Instead of killing it though, the blast alters the entity and divides it into 5 fragments that forcefully bond with 5 X-Men: Namor, Magic, Colossus, Emma Frost, and of course, their leader Cyclops. While the heroes tried to use this awesome power gallantly and responsibly, they ended up leaving quite a bit of damage behind them. Possessed by the Phoenix, Cyclops killed Professor Xavier and led many attacks against humans and mutants alike. Afterwards, he did adopt a more of a revolutionary attitude, leading a rebellious team of X-Men and coming into conflict with other superheroes and his former friend Wolverine on more than one occasion. invasion. Because of all this, Cyclops was briefly viewed as a martyr, believed to have been killed by Black Bolt in Death of X before it was revealed he had just succumbed to Mpox just days before. Number 6. Aquaman, Throne of Atlantis. Aquaman has always been a bit torn, being a hero from two worlds and all. While he was Atlantean royalty, his primary concern is always the fate of his world's oceans. However, he still has this sense of responsibility towards the surface world of his father, and this really came to play in the Throne of Atlantis storyline. Aquaman finds himself at a crossroads with his brother's determination to start a war between Atlantis and the surface after malfunctioning Navy missiles hit Atlantis. He realizes, much to the surprise of his teammates, that the Atlanteans were utilizing a strategy he had devised in case the two powers ever went to war. Despite his close relationship with his fellow heroes, he refused to stand with the Justice League against the Atlanteans and ultimately staged a brutal offense against the Justice League in the battles that followed, forsaking his old team for his homeland. To add even more insult to injury, the League eventually discovered that Aquaman's longtime pal Nuidas Vulko was behind the whole thing. He orchestrated for Atlantis to be bombed specifically to incite a war. Now, what was the end goal, you might ask? It was for the League to defeat Ocean Master, which would then lead to the reinstatement of Arthur as their king. Number 5. Wolverine Old Man Logan. Now, if there's one member of the X-Men that you can truly trust, it's definitely Wolverine. He is surprisingly loyal and dictated by a code of honor. Still though, that doesn't stop a betrayal or two from happening every now and then, though it wasn't necessarily his own fault. In the Wolverine Old Man Logan storyline, we get to see the vicious side of Wolverine that we've all come to know and love. However, like I said, it wasn't really his fault. So basically it's the future and Logan is an old man, and he hasn't used the Wolverine persona or his claws since this mysterious night in the past when the villains supposedly attacked. We learned through some flashbacks that a massive group of 40 supervillains attacked the X-Men mansion, and during this attack, Wolverine gets in touch with his primal side and grows crazy and just kills every single one of them. After the fight and the intense slaughter, things change and Wolverine realizes that this was all just an illusion. The entire time, Wolverine had his vision and mind altered by Mysterio, and all the villains that he killed in combat were actually his fellow X-Men. This destroyed Logan, and he decided to retire his Wolverine mantle for good after that, essentially killing that part of him so he would never do something like that again. It's definitely a sad way to end a run as a hero, but I can see why he felt that was necessary, and as much as I hate to say it, this was a huge betrayal and definitely a shocking one at that. Number 4. Green Lantern Emerald Twilight. In 1994, DC decided that it was finally time for Hal Jordan to step down from the Green Lantern mantle so that it could be passed on to someone else. So how did DC decide to end the career of one of their most beloved heroes? Well, they couldn't just do it quietly. Of course, they had to turn him into a villain of some sorts, undoing pretty much all of the good he's ever done. In the Reign of Superman storyline, which took place after the Death of Superman storyline, Hal's home of Coast City was completely destroyed by the villains Mongol and Cyborg Superman. As a result, the city was demolished and its 7 million citizens were killed. This turn of events made Hal completely lose it, and he believed that if he could steal all of the main power battery's energy, the source of the Green Lantern Ring's power, he could permanently rebuild Coast City. To do so, he killed all of the remaining Green Lantern Corps and the villain Sinestro, which unfortunately led him to becoming the villain Parallax, who even to this day looms over Hal. Hal did eventually redeem himself by sacrificing his life to restart the sun during the Final Night storyline, and also by revealing that his madness had just been caused by him being possessed by that fear entity. Hal would later go on to reform the Green Lantern Corps thanks to the expert guidance of Jeff Johns. Now, all things considered, this is a huge betrayal and a bit of a tough one to overlook, making it remain a black spot on DC's legacy. Check out this insane storyline for yourself in 1994's Green Lantern Volume 3, number 48 to number 50. Number 3. Tara the Judas Contract. Now, if I'm being honest, there is probably no betrayal more famous than that of Tara Markov's. Debuting in New Teen Titans number 26, Tara Markov was a young, precocious girl who joined the team. It was learned later that Tara infiltrated the team at the behest of Deathstroke, dismantling the team from the inside. Throughout the 4-part storyline, Tara gives Terminator all of the information he needs in order to take down the Titans one by one, and he does so starting with Corey and Donna Troy, slowly making his way through all of them until he got to Dick Grayson, who was able to elude him. Realizing that he can never truly retire from superheroing, Dick adopts a new costume and identity and calls himself Nightwing, while Joey is also ready to follow him into battle as Jericho. Adeline then gives the heroes the location of the Hive Command Center, and Nightwing and Jericho go to the Hive base nestled in the Rocky Mountains, sneaking into the facility and discovering that the Teen Titans have been strapped to a giant machine which is slowly siphoning away all of their life energy. Nightwing and Jericho fight through a horde of Hive shock troops, but are eventually captured. Using the Terminator's body and weaponry, Jericho frees the other Titans and begins fighting the Hive, and Tara is enraged at Terminator and feels that his affection of Joey makes him look weak. She completely loses control of her sanity and yearns for nothing more than the death of everyone in the room. Changeling refuses to believe that Tara has gone bad and is certain that the Terminator has just brainwashed her. Tara's powers rage out of control until she finally causes a mountain of earth and debris to collapse down from the ceiling, unfortunately killing her in the process. Number 2. Batman Tower of Babel. Easily one of the most trusted but not the most trusting heroes around, it should really come as no surprise that Batman had secret files outlining the ways to take down his teammates just in case, right? Well, apparently it was pretty shocking for the other members of the Justice League during the Tower of Babel storyline. It's an insane level of preparation, like Batman prepared for some truly brutal plans, including blinding Green Lantern and turning Superman's skin invisible so that he'd go insane from yellow sun overexposure. It was revealed in JLA Tower of Babel that these files were stolen by Ra's al Ghul and used to orchestrate a debilitatingly effective attack on the individual members of the JLA. When Batman comes clean with how the villain was able to pinpoint their various weaknesses, half of his teammates vote for him to be booted out of the group. However, he ends up leaving on his own accord, but his friendship with the other members was deeply damaged, and even to this day it remains a bit of a problem. Even in the New 52 universe, such plans still existed and Batman came clean about it, but thankfully this time Superman was able to convince the League not to hold it against him. Number 1. Captain America's Secret Empire. I feel like we all knew this one was coming, like, come on, this was definitely the most shocking betrayal in recent comic history. After the Red Skull messed with and manipulated Kobik, a sentient cosmic cube, Steve Rogers revealed himself to be a Hydra defector, but more specifically, he was a Hydra sleeper agent who happened to be a twisted version of Cap that secretly took his place. Allying himself with a new Madam Hydra, Rogers took advantage of a global catastrophe to seize control of the world's government. Once in power, Hydra just made its move. S.H.I.E.L.D., infiltrated by Hydra thoroughly, began assuming control of key locations and executing any who stand in its way. I'll let you all check out this storyline for yourself because it is a great one, but I will tell you that our good Cap comes out on top in the end, defeating his evil doppelganger in a head-to-head battle. A few weeks later, and after a ton of hard work, the United States was thankfully turned back to normal.